Orders of the day.
Government orders, Government Bills Commons, resuming debate at second reading of Bill C-42, the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act.
When this matter was last before the House, the honourable member from Brandon Souris had completed his remarks, but was no. Pardon me.
The last person.
Pardon me. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in the House today to speak in support of the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act, Bill C-42. This important legislation highlights our Conservative government's commitment to firearms policies that are safe and sensible. This is a theme that is seen throughout this bill, but it is a theme that has been at the heart of how our government deals with issues related to firearms. In other words, we believe that we should punish lawbreakers, but we should reduce red tape for law-abiding Canadians. I'd like to briefly highlight the 8 changes contained in this important legislation, but first I'd like to give some context as to how we arrived at the situation we are in today. While a variety of permits and documents to possess firearms have existed in Canada since 1892, licensing in the context that today's Canadians would recognize did not begin until 1979. The Firearms Acquisition Certificate system existed until it was amended by the previous Liberal government in 1995. Bill C-68 created the Firearms Act, which put new and onerous requirements on licensing and transportation of firearms. This same Liberal bill also created the wasteful and ineffective Long Gun Registry. Following our Conservative government's election in 2006, we immediately took action to make sure that no one could be prosecuted for being in possession of an unregistered long gun. We also took action to end the needless Liberal gun show regulations. We deferred and are examining the repeal of the UN firearms marking regulations. And then, after many years of work, we ended the wasteful and ineffective long gun registry once and for all. Then, following an inappropriate and unacceptable decision made by unelected bureaucrats, our government took action to restore the property rights of law-abiding owners of Swiss Arms and CZ-858 rifles. It is clear that we are taking safe and sensible firearms licensing seriously. And that brings us to the important common sense legislation before us today. As I stated earlier, there are 8 key measures in this legislation. As I have said, these measures are safe and sensible, and the bill can be broken down along those lines. We are bringing forward measures that will keep Canada safe. We will require all first-time gun owners to receive basic firearms safety training. We will create a system for the RCMP and the Canadian Border Security Agency, the CBSA, to share information on firearms smuggling investigations. Shockingly, thanks to loopholes in the Liberal Firearms Act, these law enforcement agencies are barred from working together. This has led to literally thousands of firearms making their way into the black market and into the hands of thugs and criminals. Sharing will occur under Bill C-42. And we will make firearms prohibitions mandatory for serious crimes of domestic violence. We believe that the best indicator of future criminal behavior is past criminal behavior. In fact, nearly 2/3 of all those convicted of spousal homicide have a previous history of domestic violence. Taking firearms out of these volatile situations just makes good common sense. To that end, we are also making firearms laws more sensible for law-abiding Canadians who work hard and play by the rules. We will streamline licensing by merging the possession-only license and the possession and acquisition license. This will give new purchasing rights to 600,000 experienced firearms owners. We will end the needless paperwork around the authorization to transport a restricted firearm. No longer will law-abiding sport shooters need to fill out endless reams of paperwork to do something that their license ought to have authorized them to do. We will put a 6-month grace period at the end of the 5-year firearms license. You will not be allowed to purchase new firearms or ammunition or even use your firearms during that time, but you will not become an overnight paper criminal as a result of a simple, honest mistake. We will end the broad and often arbitrary discretionary authority that is given to chief firearms officers. The Firearms Act is a Canadian law, and we believe there ought to be similar standards from coast to coast to coast. Rules and procedures differing vastly between Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario is completely unacceptable, as is the troubling trend of unelected officials trying to make policy on the fly without consulting Parliament, and from time to time actually directly confronting Parliament. And last but certainly not least, we will create powers for the elected government to overturn incorrect classification decisions made by the Canadian Firearms Program. On the advice of independent experts, we will take steps to make sure that all decisions made regarding issues that impact the property rights of Canadians make good common sense. And I can assure this House and all Canadians that the first of such measures will be to return the Swiss Arms family of rifles and the CZ-858 to the classifications they had prior to February 25th, 2014. Mr. Speaker, these measures are safe and sensible. You can see that from the broad support they have received. Frontline police officers are supportive. Police chiefs are supportive. Hunting groups are supportive. Sport shooting groups are supportive. I'd like to quote the Manitoba Wildlife Federation, who said, quote, "We support smart, cost-effective firearms policy that keeps Canadians safe, but treats gun owners fairly. We applaud the Conservative government's ongoing efforts to streamline firearms licensing in Canada to make it more effective and efficient." But, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the other parties disagree. The NDP leader takes a different position on this issue, depending on whether he is in rural or urban Canada. Most recently, he said that he believed that the long gun registry was, quote, "useful." However, the Liberals take the cake when the member from Malpac makes process arguments about who ought to be making decisions, which is simply a ruse to cover the real views of his party. Consider the quote from the member for Trinity Spadina, who said that, quote, "emotional arguments," end quote, from firearms enthusiasts are not enough of a reason to justify the sale of ammunition. Can you believe that, Mr. Speaker? That member would do away with the entire hunting and sport shooting industry in Canada in one fell swoop. So, Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow that sort of reckless move to happen in Canada. I can assure you that our Conservative government will always stand up for the rights of law-abiding hunters, farmers, and sport shooters. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that all parties will support this important legislation.
Questions and comments?
Speaker, and I thank my colleague for his thoughts. During his speech, he basically said that the laws should be simplified, and that certain individuals or unelected individuals, such as firearms control individuals, police individuals, shouldn't have the right to control gun ownership laws. And I'm just thinking in terms of, this is a vast country, Mr. Speaker. It's a vast country with very different attitudes about everything across, and very different needs. And I'm wondering if the people, if my colleague doesn't, or if he discounts the fact that the people on the ground have a better idea of how certain things affect their community. So shouldn't they be in a position to say, this is a problem in this community? It may not be in that community, but it is a problem in this community. I wonder if he would like to answer that question.
The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I very much appreciate the question from my honourable colleague. He makes a very good point, and I think that's why this particular bill is receiving so much support from, as I said, police officers, police chiefs, hunting groups, and sport shooting groups. We always want to be cognizant of making sure that people are safe in their communities, and this legislation isn't going to inhibit that at all. And those who are on the ground do have probably the most understanding of the situations personally in their small communities or in our cities, no matter where we are in Canada, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And so I think that's why so many groups are so supportive of this common sense legislation. Mr. Speaker, it's also, Deputy Speaker, it's also why the changes have been made for the Swiss Arms family of rifles and the CZ-858, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They have certainly been proven to be used weapons that are used for hunting and fishing, or hunting and pardon me, not fishing, hunting and target shooting, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and so that's why I think that this is such a well-received bill.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are certain aspects of the legislation in which the Liberal Party does support. There's other areas in which we have some concern in regards to, and that's what I would like to ask the member, is that there's aspects of the legislation that empowers the ministry, in particular the government of the day through Cabinet, to ultimately determine what type of classification a gun would actually be, or a rifle would be, Mr. Speaker. And I'm wondering if the member might be able to explain to Canadians why he believes, or the government believes, that the government of the day, that being the minister responsible, is in a better position to determine what is a restricted rifle as opposed to an unrestricted rifle, for example, as opposed to having the current structure where we have professionals that do that.
The Honourable Member for Brandon-Souris.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I thank my colleague from Winnipeg North for that question as well. And of course, as I want to just reiterate what I said in the previous answer, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that is that, first of all, the safety of Canadians has to be paramount in any decisions that are made. In regards to the weapons that are being described by my colleague, all of them are still having to go through very restrictive and very thorough examinations. And I know that in these particular cases, with the two that were there, they were very thoroughly examined, very thoroughly scrutinized, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and obviously found to be very, very safe in regards to the Swiss family of arms as well as the CZ-858. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in a situation that we were faced with over a year ago on February 25th, 2014, that's certainly the reason why this has been a more common sense type of legislation that has been brought forward. It's very effective, and it certainly doesn't inhibit our police forces from doing anything in regards to keeping the public safe.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Newton North Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to let you know that I will be splitting my time with my colleague from Argenteuil, Papineau, Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, I'm rising today to oppose this bill at second reading. I listened to the arguments being presented by the government very, very carefully, and especially my colleague who just spoke. And I have not been persuaded by any arguments I've heard to date to support this piece of legislation, because what it purports to do, or what is being said that it's going to do, I do not believe that this bill achieves. I happen to be from the beautiful city of Surrey, and my riding of Newton North Delta over the last number of years has seen innumerable incidences of gun firings, many times gun-related, but just a few weeks ago, over a 28-hour time frame, we saw 5, 6, 7 gang-related shootings. And so you can imagine that we're very, very sensitive when it comes to gun control, gun licensing, etc., etc. And we're also very, very protective or very concerned about the fact that the government has failed to deliver on its commitment for additional policing. We're not saying additional policing would take care of a lot of issues in my riding, but what we're saying is it is one of the components that would help to have more men insurge out on the streets, keeping our streets safe. But looking at this piece of legislation, just going through it, one of the first components that hit me was that we're looking at sort of a grace period of 6 months when your license expires. This seems so bizarre, Mr. Speaker. Here you are a gun owner, and for 6 months after your license expires, it's perfectly okay. It's being legalized, or it's going to be legalized in this legislation. Mr. Speaker, when my driving license expires, it expires on the date, and I have to get it renewed beforehand. When my car insurance expires, I have to do that on time, or there are huge fines. But here we have something unique being built in for firearms licensing, a grace period of 6 months. And you know, Mr. Speaker, that when somebody goes for a renewal of their license, we're not just talking about just paperwork. We're talking about firearm owners being screened for mental health issues, which you and I know is fast growing in this country right now across all the age groups. And it's also a way of gauging any potential risks to themselves or others. And yet, this government sees it fit to give a 6-month grace period. I'm just so shocked by that, Mr. Speaker. Then I look at firearms transportation. And once again, this government is now authorizing automatically, without any special permission having to be sought, which it was before, that the license now includes the transportation of prohibited firearms or restricted firearms to and from any gun club or shooting range, any police station, any gun shop, any gun show, and any point of exit from Canada. This measure alone could make it more difficult for police to crack down on unauthorized and on transportation of firearms. And this is happening at the same time, Mr. Speaker, that this government, by 2014-2015, the Canada Border Services Agency operational budget will be reduced to $143.3 million a year. At the same time as they're cutting resources for CBS and, by the way, to the police by $195.2 million, what they're also doing is relaxing the rules around the transportation of guns. And this just seems totally, totally bizarre. The other concern I have is over the classification of firearms. I absolutely believe that this process needs to be depoliticized and it should not be in the hands of politicians. I love all my colleagues in this House, have a great deal of respect for the work done by many. But really, do we want to give the Cabinet the final authority and the decision maker on classification of firearms? Shouldn't that be done by experts and people in the field who know a lot more? And shouldn't it be done by the RCMP, etc., etc., etc.? So once again, a great deal of concern that we have a government, and we've seen this in other pieces of legislation as well, that is trying to put more and more power in the hands of cabinet ministers and therefore escape scrutiny. And now this bill basically transfers authority over definitions and classifications to Cabinet rather than putting emphasis on public safety. And here is another power that's being limited, Mr. Speaker, and that is the powers of provincial chief firearms officers. And this bill will limit by regulations the powers of the provincial chief firearms officers to attach conditions to license or authorization to transport. In other words, local provincial officers are having their hands tied behind their back. This would also prevent provinces from setting their chosen standards in the implementation of firearms legislation. And as you can see, Mr. Speaker, this is just not good enough. And my fear is that all of these changes are going to be putting not only our communities at risk, but our men and women in uniform who serve us at risk as well. And we've seen this government do this over and over again. And, and once again, they don't put public safety first. Once again, they're putting political pandering to their lobby groups ahead of what is good for Canadians. At this moment, Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to you about an inspector, Inspector Gary Beggs, who lives in Surrey, who has done an amazing job of serving our community, and his son served in our community as well. And at this point, I would like to recognize the remarkable patriotism displayed by RCMP Corporal Sean Begg, Detachment Commander of the RCMP Detachment in Caslow, BC. One day last week, Corporal Begg, who plays the recreational hockey on a Caslow team, journeyed with his teammates by helicopter high up into the Purcell mountain range to play a game of shinny 8,000 feet up. It was a spectacular day, and Corporal Begg, who describes himself as a proud Mountie and an even prouder Canadian, donned his regimental red serge and famous Stetson for a few shifts of the game. A teammate snapped a picture of Corporal Beggs in full dress uniform, bearing down for a shot on a goal, and the rest, as they say, is history. The picture was tweeted and is now being described as the most Canadian picture ever. Being viewed around the world now, it shines a bright light on all that is Canadian. I am sure that most members of the House have seen the photo and will join me in saluting Corporal Begg, a proud Mountie and a proud Canadian. And, Mr. Speaker, once again, I really want to reiterate that for me it is very, very disturbing that while we have the government pandering to, I would say, their lobby groups, they are failing to do the right thing, and that is to protect Canadians. And we know that the number of people who own handguns has increased incredibly. And, Mr. Speaker, I understand the needs for hunters and farmers, and you know what, we're not saying that nobody should have guns, but what we're saying is the kind of changes we're seeing in this legislation will actually do harm and will not bring peace to the streets of Surrey, and nor to other communities. And the more I reflect on this piece of legislation, the more I am really puzzled as to why a government that purports to and often sort of says they're a sort of a fighting a crime kind of a government, they would actually have legislation now that actually makes it easier for guns to be on the streets, and at the same time they're going to be cutting resources to the RCMP and to the Canadian Border Services so that we will have even less control about guns entering into the country and more relaxation about movement of weapons that kill people around inside the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister for Agriculture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are just so many things wrong in that speech that I'm not sure where to start. But let me begin with a complete misunderstanding of the bill by the NDP, whether they're doing that intentionally and trying to mislead Canadians or not. I don't care. I don't know, and I don't care. I'm looking forward to next fall's election on this issue again, running against my NDP candidate, simply because of what they're saying. There are no cuts proposed or otherwise. There's actually budget increases to both the RCMP and Border Services for a myriad of different reasons, Mr. Speaker, one of them being the influx of gun crime in this country. And, of course, we've passed a lot of legislation to address that. And just because the NDP have voted against it doesn't mean it's not being effective. The other thing she talks about, too, is why does it take a 6-month grace period when a license runs out and when her driver's license runs out that day. The difference is a criminal charge that goes along with the firearms registration not being kept up again. She also talks about how unfortunate it is that we'll allow this transport of firearms so easily. The point being made, Mr. Speaker, is that every one of those people, including me, are qualified, are certified to be able to move these firearms around in a way that's safe, that's guaranteed to be safe. So there's so much misinformation in that speech, Mr. Speaker, but I know Canadians are much smarter than that, and they see right through the NDP's stance.
The Honourable Member for Newton North Delta.
I find it really amazing, the defence, to give a 6-month grace period for a licensing to hold a gun. And I just don't see how you could actually defend that in any way, because when your license expires, it expires, and that's when, as I said previously, and maybe my colleague did not hear me, that's the time that a mental health assessment is done, a psychological assessment is done, and a license is renewed. And surely we're not saying that all of those things are unnecessary. And let me just read you a quote from the gun control group as well, and who actually agree with us. Turning a blind eye to gun owners who do not comply with the licensing requirements will put police officers and the public at risk. It will also hamper police investigations and, in some cases, hamper prosecution of gun crimes. Stop.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Mr. Speaker, and maybe if I could get the members' thoughts in regards to the timing of the legislation and the manner in which the legislation is actually being brought through. As we know, the government has instituted time allocation once again on a piece of legislation where there is differing types of opinions on both sides of the House, and yet we're being told that there's limited time, and in fact it will end today after a couple of hours of debate. The other issue is in regards to, here we are once again in an election year, and we now have this particular issue being brought to the table. It was introduced, the bill, late last fall, kind of disappeared off the agenda, and now it's back on the agenda in the last couple of days, and then the government's put on the super rush in terms of passing it. I wonder if she might want to comment in regards to the coincidence of having it in the lead-up to a federal election and the whole issue of time allocation.
The honourable member for Newton North Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for his very thoughtful question. I think it's no surprise to anybody that here we are with a time allocation, another attempt by my colleagues across the way to shut down debate. And they can't say that they're short of time because, as my colleague just said, they've had since October, and they haven't been in a hurry to bring this legislation forward. But yesterday, Mr. Speaker, in this House, I actually began to understand why this legislation is here, when my colleague from Esquimalt, Juan de Fuca, actually asked a question of the minister and received a non-reply, which was, is this a payola to the gun lobby for not testifying at C-51, where they were going to oppose that, and they withdrew from that, so we have the legislation here. And also, as we know, there's an election in the air, and my colleagues across the way love wedge politics, and they want to drum up this kind of fear, divide and conquer. But you know, Mr. Speaker, we're not going to be silenced when we have serious concerns about ill-thought-out legislation.
Reprise de débat, l'honorable député.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Argenteuil-Papineau-Mirabel. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak to Bill C-42, an act to amend the Firearms Act. This is a Conservative government bill which claims to reduce bureaucracy for firearms owners. But in my view, the impact of it will be to weaken Canadian legislation over firearms. Now, bear in mind that the government had to suspend discussion of this bill. It was supposed to be debated for the first time on October 22nd, 2014, a day that we will remember for a very long time. It was a day where we saw a soldier shot and assassinated at the War Memorial just a few steps from this place before he stormed the Parliament buildings as such. Now, my view, Mr. Speaker, is that the government should have suspended this bill indefinitely. Robust, accurate data, as well as legislation governing the use of firearms in Canada, along with resources and tools to enforce these rules by police officers, is of crucial importance for public safety and to reduce violence in Canada, especially violence against women. But with this bill, the Conservatives are playing partisan politics. with the issue of firearms. They're using this issue to score political points and to create a wedge issue among Canadians. This is jeopardizing public safety and creating additional difficulties for our police services in Canada. They're attempting to change the debate and to make us forget that we're talking about public safety. Reasonable people from various regions of the country could easily work together to come up with solutions to these problems instead of simply playing wedge politics. In my view, and in the view of the NDP, any changes to the Firearms Act must be undertaken cautiously, and the main objective must be to improve public safety. Bill C-42 does not meet that criteria, and we cannot support it. Now, let's talk about the measures contained in Bill C-42. First of all, this bill includes a 6-month grace period following the expiry of a license that is valid for 5 years, for firearms owners who have omitted to renew it. Currently, to have the right to carry a firearm, owners must have an authorization to transport, and they must request that from the Chief Firearms Office of their province. This authorization enables them to transport their firearm to and from a specific location, and they must have this authorization on their person. This authorization under C-42 is granted automatically with the firearm, thereby enabling the person to carry the prohibited weapon to and from a club, for example, a shooting range, a police station, or a place where there is an exhibit of firearms. Now, the bill also gives additional powers to the Cabinet, which can therefore now cancel or change the classification of firearms under Section 84 of the Criminal Code by regulation and create exceptions. So by regulation, Cabinet could categorize firearms without restriction or make them, change the categorization for these firearms. And at present, this is currently something that is done by the RCMP. This classification will subsequently be approved by the Minister of Public Safety.
So there's some problems with this, including the grace period. It's a problem because a firearm license can allow police services and other competent authorities to get access to up-to-date information on the owner of a firearm. This is very important, and we talked a lot about this when we were talking about the long gun registry. It's important for police services to be able to know who has a firearm, where it is, and other details like that. In terms of the process for license renewal, firearm owners are evaluated to determine, for example, mental health issues. All potential risks are we attempt to identify them, and these assessments can help prevent tragedies from happening. The additional grace period could limit access to that information or delay access to it, and that leads to some very serious public safety risks. Certainly, the members of the Conservative Party will say that, well, if the person doesn't renew their license, they will have a criminal record. But it's criminal because it's serious. It's not like this is something that's renewed every year. It's renewed every 5 years. And the reason why it's obligatory and why it's criminal to not renew your license on time is because it's so important to look at the mental health risks and to look at what can happen in somebody's life in 5 years. A lot can happen in 5 years, so it's extremely important to continue doing these assessments because a lot can happen in someone's life. So it's important that we be able to ensure that all license holders are in good mental health, that they are capable of using their firearm properly for hunting or for other sporting reasons. the transport measure could hurt police services in their fight against the unauthorized transport of firearms. So why is it so important to control the use of firearms? Why is it important to put public safety forward? Well, it's clear that it's very important. Our goal here is not to attack rural Canadians or hunters. No, we really want to put an emphasis on public safety. These are weapons, and they could be used to kill people. And so it's very logical to have as many controls as possible, while ensuring that people can also use their firearms.
Gun violence remains a factor in many domestic abuse cases, causing some women to stay in abusive situations out of fear of being shot by their partner. Unfortunately, the presence of firearms is a top risk factor associated with domestic murders of women in Canada. In 2009, nearly 75,000 incidents of violent crime against women by current or former spouses, or someone they were by current or former spouses, or someone they were otherwise in an intimate relationship with. And these are the ones that were reported to police. It's estimated that over 70% of such incidents go unreported. Women are 3 to 4 times more likely than men to be victims of spousal homicide. And according to the most recent data available from Statistics Canada in the past decade, from 2000 to 2009, over a quarter of women killed by a current or previous partner were by means of firearms. Most women killed with guns are killed with legally owned guns. Family and intimate assaults involving firearms were 12 times more likely to result in death than intimate assaults that did not involve firearms. But homicides of women with firearms dropped by over 63% with progressive strengthening of gun laws from 91 to 05, while murders of women by other means, so stabbing and beating, declined only by 38%. Because we were able to actually enforce laws and put laws in place.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 25 years now since on December 6, 1989, 14 young women were killed in the Polytechnic school massacre in Montreal simply because they were women. These events have led to days of action to eliminate violence against women. These are moments when we think about the importance of fighting for women's rights, a fight that continues to go on if we want to find true equality for men and women. This event was a turning point in the debate in firearms control in Canada, and it called on, it incited Canadian politicians to tighten access to weapons. The NDP have always proposed practical solutions to meet the legitimate concerns of many Canadians who use firearms. And we've always been careful to respect the rights of Aboriginal people, while also ensuring that police forces have the tools that they need to ensure the safety of Canadians. Data show that there are the data concerning the 1.6 million firearms in the province of Quebec will now be destroyed. This week, members of the National Assembly of Quebec unanimously passed a motion asking the Conservative Prime Minister immediately transfer that information to Quebec. And this information is very important for the province of Quebec, but unfortunately, this bill that is before us will not help Canadians, so we cannot support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Prince George Peace River.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for her response. I certainly have a daughter and have a wife, too, that I'm concerned about their safety, but I'm also a firearms owner myself. My daughter and my wife have fired all my firearms very safely and very soundly, and they're fine. But I would like to just respond about her comments about Quebec and what Quebecers think. I have a quote here from the Quebec Hunting and Fishing Federation, who happens to be thrilled with this initiative. Quote, Quebec hunters are very pleased with this bill because it simplifies the license issuing process for law-abiding users while reinforcing concepts of safety and education. I just would like to ask the member if she could respond to those Quebecers and their concerns with
The honourable member for Papineau Mirabel. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, we really don't believe that public safety has been put at the forefront with this bill, and we really need to work to ensure that the use of firearms for hunting and for sport is really placed in the right context. And the fact that it's harder to follow up on firearms with this grace period is quite dangerous. It's important for us to work on something else together as Quebecers. As somebody who grew up in a rural area, who represents a rural area, I've always been around firearms as well. My family didn't have any, but certainly all of our neighbors go hunting every fall. So it's normal for me to see firearms in day-to-day life. I recognize that that's an important part of rural life. It's important that hunters be able to transport their firearms easily for hunting season. But the fact is that we don't know what could happen in somebody's life to change their life. So it's important that every 5 years people's mental health be checked. It's just a good measure for public safety. Questions and comments? The Honourable for Trinity Spadina.
Listened with interest to the reciting of the safety that was achieved with sensible firearms control, and you listed in particular the impact it had on reducing. Statements were made about the reduction of domestic incidents of violence and of homicide. I'm wondering if you have similar information about the reduction of suicides.
Before I go to the honourable member, remind this honourable member and others to direct their comments directly to the chair rather than to their colleagues.
The honourable member for Argenteuil-Papineau Mirabel.
My speech, I mean, with Polytechnique, the events of Polytechnique 25 years ago, that was really a turning point in how we see gun control in Canada. And in Quebec, I think we really do see it more in that way still because that it hit closer to home. So Quebecers tend to be a lot more understanding about public safety measures that need to be in place. And one of the things that I have seen is, in fact, not only did with these gun control measures that were brought in over the past 25 years, did the rate of violence with domestic violence with guns go down, but in fact, the number of suicides is actually much more. I don't actually have the numbers in front of me, but it's radically higher, the amount of suicides that it has prevented. And that is very, very important to look at. I mean, like I was saying, Mr. Speaker, it is important to understand so much can happen over 5 years in someone's life. It's important to make sure that we have access to good public health measures that are good for public safety.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Nipissing-Temiskaming.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be splitting my time with the member from Sault Ste. Marie. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to rise today to discuss the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act. This bill is an important step toward strengthening the property rights of all Canadians, and especially those law-abiding firearms owners. The people of Nipissing-Temiskaming know that a firearm in the hands of a trained and licensed individual is simply another piece of property. In North Bay, they know that registering a long gun will not stop someone bent on committing a crime. In Temiskaming Shores, Cobalt, and Temagami, they know that serious prison sentences will stop crime with firearms. In East Ferris and Bonfield, they know that it just makes sense that anyone owning a firearm should be trained on how to handle it safely. In Powassan, Callander, and Nipissing, they know that red tape designed solely to discourage participation in Canadian heritage activities like hunting or sport shooting simply is not fair. In Calvin and Chisholm, They know that the best way to reduce the risk of gun crime is to take guns out of the hands of domestic abuser. And in Mattawa and Latchford, they know that nobody should face a 3-year sentence just because they made a paperwork mistake. My point, Mr. Speaker, is the good people of Nipissing-Temiskaming know common sense. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to welcome the Minister of Public Safety to Powassan in my riding on July 23rd last summer to announce the very same safe and sensible measures that we are debating here today. And I say safe and sensible very deliberately, because that is exactly what our Conservative government's firearms policies are all about. We believe that those who are predisposed to obey the law should not have to fill out mountains of paper or be inconvenienced by red tape, but those who break the law should be punished. I would like to focus on one particular aspect of this important bill that has particular relevance to the people of my riding and indeed all of the people of Ontario. That issue is the limitation of the discretion of the chief firearms officers. For those who are watching at home and are not familiar with firearms legislation, a chief firearms officer is the bureaucrat who is responsible for the administration of firearms laws in a particular province. Some of these bureaucrats are appointed by the federal government, some by the provincial government. But they all share one common characteristic. None of them have ever received a single vote from an elector. In Ontario, and to a lesser extent in other provinces, the chief firearms officer has assumed less of an administrative role and more of a policymaker role. First and foremost, most notoriously, the Ontario chief firearms officer tried to establish a long gun registry by the back door just weeks after this Parliament voted to end the wasteful and ineffective long gun registry once and for all. This move was so outrageous that the government had to take regulatory steps to clarify the intention of the ending of the Long Gun Registry Act. More recently, the Ontario Chief Firearms Officer concocted a plan to require law-abiding restricted firearm owner to get a letter from any shooting club that they visit to say they are welcome. Mr. Speaker, I have not found any legal authority for this needless paperwork within the Firearms Act and its subordinate regulations. And, Mr. Speaker, I've just recently been informed of a situation where the Ontario Chief Firearms Officer has gone so far into intervening with the lawful enjoyment of private property that he has made the approval of a particular shooting club contingent on them drastically altering their hours of operation. Mr. Speaker, this is clearly beyond limits. There is no added public safety value by trying to dictate the hours of a private business. And there is definitely no authority in law for this type of behavior from an unelected bureaucrat. That is why the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act will make it clear that the discretion of the chief firearms officers is limited and can be curtailed by the elected government. This is against principles which are fundamental to Canadian democracy. An unelected bureaucrat should not be able to make the decisions that, by one stroke of their pen, can adversely impact the lives of law-abiding individuals. Mr. Speaker, that is a safe and sensible policy. Firearms laws are passed by this Parliament. They should not differ vastly from province to province. That sounds like common sense to me and to the people I represent.
That's right.
Unfortunately, we have seen too well that what the other party leaders think about the rights of law-abiding firearms owners. While traveling in rural Canada, the leader of the NDP says he has changed his gun-grabbing ways, but when he's here in Ottawa, surrounded by the media elite, he says that he believes that the long gun registry was, and I quote, useful, end quote. Equally appalling is the position of the Liberal leader, who clearly emulates former Liberal Justice Minister Alan Rock's policies on firearms. That Liberal minister said that he came to Ottawa with the firm view that only the police and the military should have firearms. It seems, Mr. Speaker, that if the Liberals had their way, there would be no more hunting and no more sport shooting in Canada. In short, they would eradicate a fundamental part of Canadian heritage. Eradicate it. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud and honored to stand in this House and truly represent the concerns and desires of my constituency and restore trust, unlike my Liberal predecessor who told the constituents of Nipissing-Temiskaming one thing, then went to Ottawa and voted the exact opposite.
Typical Liberal.
Mr. Speaker, let me assure you, as well as all Canadians, that such nonsensical policies will never see the light of day under our Conservative government. That's right. We will stand up for the democratically elected members of this House, making safe and sensible firearms policies. And we will stand up for the rights of law-abiding hunters, farmers, and sports enthusiasts. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. This morning, in reading the newspapers, I was particularly surprised to see that a number of newspapers mentioned the fact that our Minister of Public Safety decided not to participate in a fundraising activity where the prize for being there was a firearm. And I imagine it must have come with all the licenses. And I have to ask the question, and this is the question that I will address to my colleague, is there not something in Bill C-42 a clear problem if we give the Minister of Public Safety the power to change the classification of certain firearms?
Member for Nipissing-Temiskaming.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for the question. Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated, we believe that elected officials should have the power. We've seen the problem with this bill when unelected officials arbitrarily change legislation contrary to the wishes of this Parliament. We will continue to reform this legislation and achieve the equitable balance as long as we're in government, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker.
The time for government orders has expired. The honourable member for Nipissing-Temiskaming will have 3 minutes remaining for questions and comments when this matter returns before the House. Déclaration de député.
Statements by members.
For West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Mr. Speaker, small towns and villages bring out the best of Canadians, a sense of intimacy, the caring for one's neighbour, and the pursuit of excellence at individual and community levels. Lions Bay, BC is one of those great Canadian municipalities, known for its resilient, talented people small in number who like to dream big. Lions Bay was one of the first Canadian municipalities to proclaim National Health and Fitness Day. Its people take care of safety for a long swath of Highway 99. Its search and rescue volunteers and firefighters are legendary, and you'll not hear louder cheers for events than in Lions Bay, like the annual Grand Fondo bike race from Vancouver to Whistler. This is a community that works together, laughs together, and when tragedies occur, like the death of lovely little Aaron Moore just before Christmas, cries together. Mr. Speaker, last Saturday, I had the honour to join many Lions Bay residents to celebrate the official opening of its updated community centre, supported by our government's Western Economic Diversification Fund. This centre is a place where individuals and families will gather to exercise together in body, mind, and soul.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Abitibi, James Bay, Nunavik, AU.
Mr. Speaker, it is usually with great honour that I stand in this House, but not today. Not today, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with deep pain, deep sorrow, and deep sadness. The community of Mistissini, the entire Cree Nation, the entire northern Quebec, Mr. Speaker, are mourning the loss of 5 young men in a fire while out on the land. There is no greater loss that a family and a community can face than the loss of a youth. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, today, Mistissini, UHG, and Northern Quebec are mourning and crying for 5 of them. It is therefore with heavy heart that I express in this chamber my condolences to the families and friends of David Jimikin, of Emmett Kunishish, of Juetan Kunishish, Kevin Loon, and Charlie Gunner. As a father, Mr. Speaker, I can't even begin to imagine the pain that families and friends are feeling today. So today, Mr. Speaker, I want to send my support, my love, and our prayers in these trying moments and this dark time of need. May their memories be a blessing as we collectively attempt to come to terms with this sad and horrible loss. My friend Jason Kunishish, who lost a son, a brother, and 3 friends in this fire, Mr. Speaker, said it best. Chemendo wichinan shue. Chemendo wichinan shue. May the Great Spirit stand with us.
The honourable member for Don Valley East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my constituents in Don Valley East, I look forward to welcoming the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his first trip to Canada. As a Canadian of Indian origin, I'm thrilled to see this important visit happen. This is an example of the ever-expanding ties between our great countries. Canada and India are negotiating a free trade deal that will create jobs, grow our economy, and create long-term prosperity. Right now, trade between Canada and India is expected to be valued at $15 billion by year's end. With this visit, we expect our trade will continue to expand. Canada and India have a long-standing bilateral ties, built upon shared values of democracy, pluralism, and strong people-to-people links. I am sure that the Prime Minister Modi's visit will be successful and the relationship between Canada and India will continue to be strengthened. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Randon Burns St. George's.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the achievement of a team of under-12 female hockey players from Stephenville in my riding of Randon Burns St. George's. 2 years ago, they decided they wanted to play hockey. They had limited skating experience, and holding a hockey stick was not something with which they were familiar, but they were determined. That first year they played in the provincials, and while they ranked 16th out of the 16 teams entered, they came away without a win. Everyone who witnessed them were blown away by their team spirit. Last year, with some experience under their belt, their play improved, and they ranked 6th out of the 19 teams that competed, which brings us to this year. They played in 3 tournaments before taking part again in the provincials, which included 20 teams. This same group of girls who lost every game they played 2 years ago, this year showed what commitment and determination can do. They went undefeated in every tournament in which they participated, winning the title of provincial champions in their category. I ask all members of the House to join me in congratulating the Stephenville Under-12 female hockey team and thanking the coaches who helped guide them to their newfound success. Thank
you. The honourable member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to celebrate the first Pope John Paul II Day in Canada. We will forever celebrate and honour St. John Paul II on April 2nd each year. Pope John Paul II was a champion of freedom and human rights. His legacy goes far beyond his role as Pope. He was vital in promoting international understanding, peace building, a bridge between faiths, and a champion of youth. He was central to defeating communism in Europe and has left a profound and lasting impact on the world. I had the honour to meet him and to help bring World Youth Days to Canada in 2002, a memory I will always carry with me. I would like to thank my colleague from Mississauga, East Cooksville, for introducing the bill and for allowing me the honour of seconding it. Mr. Speaker, today, April 2nd, also marks the 95th birthday of my father, Lieutenant Colonel Zdzisław Opitz, a soldier of General Władysław Anders' Polish Second Corps, and a Gulag survivor. I wish my dad 100 lat today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Federal Caucus of the New Democratic Party, I wish to extend warmest wishes to members of the Jewish community as they gather to celebrate Passover with songs, wine, and a meal shared with family and friends. Families will gather to retell the powerful story of the exodus of the Jewish people out of slavery and celebrate the victory of freedom, faith, and hope over oppression, persecution, and hate. As families and friends gather together across the country at their Seder tables to share the story of their rich culture, faith, and traditions, it's also a time to reflect on the many blessings we have here in Canada and to remember those around the world who are still struggling to find the peace and security that we enjoy at home. So on behalf of Canada's New Democrats, we offer our best wishes to a happy holiday to families celebrating Passover across the country and around the world. Chag Pishach Shamich.
The honourable member for Brampton West.
Mr. Speaker, this past weekend was the 19th annual Celebrity Chefs Men Who Can Cook that was held in my hometown of Brampton. This is an event that brings together both professional and amateur chefs who compete for the title of Best Celebrity Chef. In the past 3 years, I've always enjoyed competing, but have never even come close to winning. Sometimes it's just the participation that counts. The United Achievers Club raises funds for great causes in our city. The funds raised from that event will have scholarships for young people in our community, and the balance of the funds will go into research for sickle cell research at the Brampton Civic Hospital. So please join me in thanking and celebrating the United Achievers Club of Brampton for all the good work that they do in our community.
The honourable member for Huron-Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week is National Dental Hygienist Week. 59% of Canadian children and 96% of adults have experienced cavities. 21% of Canadian adults have experienced periodontal issues. Research shows a direct link between oral health and overall health and well-being, such as periodontal disease being linked to a number of serious illnesses, including lung disease, diabetes, and heart disease. Dental hygiene is the sixth largest registered health profession in Canada, with 26,800 registered hygienists working in a variety of settings. Greater awareness of proper oral health practices and the need to regularly visit a dental professional is paramount to ensuring Canadians lead healthier and happier lives. Promoting the importance of the issue and celebrating the successes of the profession and contributions of dental hygienists will lead to increased public awareness. Make your appointment today. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. On Refugee Rights Day, let's remember the courage of those who come to Canada so their family can live in peace and safety. And let's remember Canada's responsibility toward asylum claimants. Although the government has promised to take in 10,000 more Syrian refugees over the next 3 years, it remains to be seen whether the government will keep its word.
2013 objectives of only 1,300 refugees 2 years later than promised. We have reason to be concerned. Mr. Speaker, on this Refugee Rights Day, the NDP urges the Conservative ministers to present us a credible plan to meet his promise to reach refugee targets. Thank you.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has been at the forefront of the Ebola response since the earliest days of the outbreak in West Africa. Canadian healthcare workers remain on the ground assisting with international aid efforts, and Canadian scientists have discovered one of the most promising Ebola vaccines in the world. We are supporting unprecedented clinical trials all over the world to ensure this vaccine's deployment as quickly as possible, and I'm very pleased to report that the most recent results are in. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, Canada's vaccine has proven to be both safe and effective in a Phase 1 clinical trial and is closer than ever to being widely deployed to stamp out the remainder of this current outbreak and prevent others from ever occurring. We should all be proud of our Canadian scientists and their work to develop this crucial vaccine that is bringing the world ever closer to ending this outbreak and protecting the health and safety of the global community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, today across Canada, people are coming together to call for justice for Cindy Gladue. By doing so, they are calling for justice for all missing and murdered Indigenous women. Lauren Crazybull, an activist from Alberta, said it well. Quote, Cindy's case is so visibly unjust. Our community doesn't want to wait for another case to happen or another woman to go missing or be found murdered. This is our breaking point. End of quote. People and systems have tried to dehumanize Cindy Gladue, but today's calls for justice honor her memory. Like never before, communities are speaking out and standing up against systems' failures to address the high rates of violence faced by Indigenous women in Canada. Today, thousands are gathered to send a direct message. No more missing and murdered Indigenous women. Today, they and we are calling for justice for Cindy Gladue and for all missing and murdered Indigenous women.
The honourable member for Brant.
Speaker, earlier this week, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that the family tax cut and enhanced universal child care benefit will put more money in the pockets of every Canadian family with children. The PBO also confirmed that these benefits will help low-income families the most. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, the NDP and the Liberals disagree with our approach. Instead, they have insulted millions of Canadian families by claiming that, unless they use a licensed daycare space, they are not providing child care for their children and that they don't deserve support. Mr. Speaker, that's completely false. It's clear that the NDP and the Liberals are so blinded by their ideology that they simply don't understand what Canadian families need. What they need is more support from the government for their choices, not less support for higher taxes like the opposition wants. Our Conservative plan supports every single family with children because we trust mums and dads with their child care choices.
The honourable member for Cape Breton, Canso.
Speaker, tomorrow will mark the 50th anniversary of the Canada Pension Plan, which, along with the Quebec Pension Plan, was created to ensure that all working Canadians had the opportunity to retire with dignity. It sounds like common sense today, but at the time it took extraordinary vision, diplomacy, and the persistence of then Prime Minister Lester Pearson to get it done. But in the 1990s, the plan's future was in doubt and required major renovations to save it. Finance Minister Paul Martin Jr. built the business case, the social consensus, and the national momentum to rejuvenate the plan. A footnote, the plan received strong support across Canada, except for the provincial NDP governments in BC and Saskatchewan. Oh, and our current Prime Minister, he and his Federal Reform Party, they voted against it as well. The CPP was a historic accomplishment. However, retirement income insecurity is a growing fact of our life for far too many Canadians. All this to say, Canada is once again in need of a government that will honour Lester Pearson's ambition to ensure a fair, efficient and adequate system of retirement income for all Canadians.
The honourable member for Whitby-Oshawa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our Conservative government is focused on the priorities of Canadian families. That's why we have introduced the family tax cut and the universal child care benefit that will put more money in the pockets of every Canadian family. This is in stark contrast to the NDP and the Liberal plan to raise taxes for all Canadians and take away the family tax cut, as well as the expansion of the universal child care benefit. Just this week, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that our plan will benefit 100% of Canadian families with children under the age of 18. Canadians know that they can count on our Conservative government to ensure that we give money back to the real child care experts. Their names are Mom and Dad.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, despite all the criticism about the lack of oversight and the dilution of our freedoms, the Conservatives are stubbornly pushing C-51 through. The Minister of Public Safety even wants to celebrate by raffling off a rifle. The Liberals, meanwhile, are searching for their backbone. They'll be looking for a long time because it's hard to find a backbone when you say you're opposed, but you vote in favour anyway because of the polls. Even the Bloc finally saw the light and voted against it. So all the opposition parties, except the third place party, are united. All progressives are now united behind the only party, the only leader who scoffed at pressure from the Conservatives, the only one who stood on guard from the beginning for our rights and freedoms, a man of deep conviction and the next Prime Minister of Canada, the leader of the NDP.
member for Jasnefe, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday evening, the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2015 was passed by Public Safety Committee. This is thanks to the hard work of our Conservative members. If the Liberals and NDP had their way, our National Security Agency would be deprived of important tools and resources. The NDP introduced dozens of amendments that were needless. In fact, they even had to withdraw one because they had not taken the time to understand the practical impact. Not to be outdone, the Liberals voted to allow free reign of terrorist travelers to get on an aircraft with law-abiding Canadians. Clearly, only our Conservative government can be trusted to keep the Canadians safe from terrorists.
Question orale, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, first the Prime Minister can't deliver a budget on time, even though all the provinces can. Then we learned that the first item in the budget is $7.5 million to promote the budget and the Conservative Party. Then the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister both flee the nation's capital to avoid answering questions. Now, we know that this budget will take billions from the middle class and give it to the wealthiest few. Is that why the Prime Minister won't answer questions about his budget? Because he's balancing it on the backs of the middle class?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of
Mr.
Finance.
Speaker, it's important that Canadians from all regions of Canada are aware of our recently announced tax relief and benefits for Canadians' families and know how to access them. Important tax breaks such as the doubling of the Children's Fitness Tax Credit, the increase to the child care expense deduction, the new family tax cut, and the enhancement of the universal child care benefit. It's our government's responsibility to inform Canadians how to access these important tax breaks before the opposition tries to take them away.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Interesting that they chose Canada Goose to make their announcement about the budget date. Because you remember who suggested serving Canada Goose to the hungry homeless? None other than Camembert Conservative Nancy Ruth. And, of course, this budget will only make the income gap worse. Jim Flaherty, Preston Manning, the Parliamentary Budget Office all say the Prime Minister's idea of taking billions from the middle class to give it to the wealthiest few is atrocious. His own speechwriter said it's socialism for the wealthy. Which is it? Let them eat Camembert or let them eat goose?
The Honourable Minister of State for Social Development.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are very pleased that we're going to be introducing a low-tax budget that will increase benefits to families, Mr. Speaker, consistent with what we have done since we came into government. Not only are we creating jobs and economic stability for this country, we have faith in Canadian families, we have faith in Canadian seniors, we have faith in Canadian businesses, and we're showing that faith by putting money in their pockets. We'll continue with that, Mr. Speaker. We won't follow the NDP high tax for
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Since they took power, the Conservatives have presided over hundreds of thousands of good jobs in manufacturing. For several months now, scores of other jobs have been lost in retail, 1,500 just last week at Future Shop. There's a reason why the Governor of the Bank of Canada said that the results that we would be seeing are atrocious. He used that very word, atrocious, to describe the record. Instead of complaining about how cold the Camembert is on their first-class flights, when will the Conservatives start helping the middle class?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, we are helping the middle class by giving money directly to Canadians, putting it in the pockets of Canadian families. The leader of the NDP has said this week that families with children who don't go to a government daycare pay no cost to care for their children. They think that children at home or staying with a family or with a neighbor don't have any costs associated with that, and they should apologize for a remark like that.
For Timmins James Bay.
Voilà, le grand fromage.
That's the big cheese over there.
Canadians worry
about paying for childcare, Conservative and Liberal senators are worried about the appropriate temperature for serving camembert. Senator Ruth is telling us that Canadians just don't understand how hard it is for her to fly and quote from around the world to show up in Ottawa. Well, get this, she lives in Toronto, so why are we being stuck with her flights? Does this government really believe it's appropriate that taxpayers get stuck with a bill for these globe-trotting aristocratic senators?
But I tell you what, Mr. Speaker, yesterday I found out, of course, that the member for Scarborough Southwest in Toronto, re-owes the taxpayers $144,000 for an office in Montreal, Mr. Speaker. So he sent his staff, as opposed to having them work in his office in Scarborough, he sent them to Montreal and owes the taxpayer $144,000. I hope he'll do the right thing and repay that $144,000.
Before I go back to the honourable member for Timmins James Bay, just remind all honourable members that questions ought to relate to the administration of the government and answers ought to be directed back towards the question. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Exactly, Mr. Speaker. This is Parliament. We're dealing with the business of government, and he's acting like the shopkeeper in a Monty Python cheese sketch. I mean, we're talking about here, we've got one senator with $250,000 in bogus claims, another of $100,000. And we're talking about taxpayer accountability. Next week, Mike Duffy goes on trial for charges of accepting a bribe that nobody is charged with giving him. The bribe involved the Prime Minister's lawyer and Chief of Staff. So we're asking the Prime Minister to clarify Canadians how this can be. Will the Prime Minister agree to speak at the trial?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary of the Prime Minister.
Speaker, as we said on a number of occasions, we'll continue to provide all the assistance that is needed by the Crown in order to prosecute Mr. Duffy. He's accused of taking illegal expenses, and if he's found guilty of that, he should face the full extent of the law, Mr. Speaker. The only leader in this House that will be testifying in front of a court is actually the Leader of the Opposition, who owes $400,000 to the people of Canada for illegal office expenses. And he can bring 67 other members of the NDP with him when they explain to Canadians how they're going to repay the $3 million that they owe them in illegal expenses.
The honourable member for West Mountville Marie.
Mr. Speaker, according to TD Bank, the unemployment rate will go to 7% between now and the end of the year. And unfortunately, many Canadians are simply giving up on looking for a job. If the number of Canadians looking for work were at the same level as that it was at the start of the crisis, the unemployment rate would be 9%. Well, what should we do? Invest in infrastructure now, not in 5 years from now. But the government is placing its priorities on tax cuts for the richest, like the Prime Minister's family. When will this government stimulate growth and employment? Mr. Speaker, the best way to stimulate growth and employment is to put money back in the pockets of Canadian families, and that is what we've done with tax decreases, with the increase in the benefit for childcare. The Liberals voted against. They are opposed to that, and they want to take that money away from Canadian families by increasing taxes. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to create jobs. We have created more than 1 million net new jobs since the recession, and we are going to continue to create jobs.
The honourable member for Kings Heads.
Speaker, while Canadians wait for the budget, the Finance Minister is actually cutting funds for his department's Fiscal and Economic Analysis unit by more than a third. This minister has a history of making mistakes and introducing bad policy. There's his so-called small business jobs credit, which actually rewards firing workers. Then there's his $2 billion a year income splitting plan, which manages to be unfair, fiscally irresponsible, and bad for growth. Why is the minister getting rid of the evidence that might prevent him from making more mistakes?
The Honourable Minister of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's no mistake that we are giving families tax cuts and tax benefits. And it's also no mistake, and Canadians know, that just as we're They're giving them those benefits. If the Liberals had the chance, they would end the income splitting for families. They would end income splitting for seniors. They're going to vote against the expanded and increased UCCB, so we know what they're going to do with that, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to give money back to Canadian families, Canadian seniors, Canadian job creators. They can try to take it away and increase taxes. We'll never do that, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kings Hands.
Speaker, the Conservatives are more focused on advertising the budget than they are on writing it. Now they're spending $7.5 million tax dollars on budget ads this spring. Meanwhile, young Canadians are struggling to find summer jobs. A single ad during the hockey playoffs could help pay for more than 30 jobs in the Canada Summer Jobs program. When will the Conservatives stop wasting tax dollars promoting themselves? And when will they start investing in summer jobs for Canadians and help young Canadians get the jobs they need?
Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians are always amused when the Liberal Party talks about government funding for advertising. We're still looking for the $40 million missing dollars over there. Mr. Speaker, what our advertising will tell Canadians is that they're entitled to claim $1,000 for the Children's Fitness Tax Credit to help soccer moms and hockey dads, that they will get an increased universal child care benefit of almost $2,000 for kids under 6 and $720 for kids 6 through 17, that income splitting for families and for pensioners will put money directly in the pockets of the middle class. The Liberals don't want people to know about it because they would take that money away.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dallaire. Senators are complaining about having to respond to questions from the Auditor General. According to Senator Ruth, investigators can't understand the obligations of senators. And according to her, taxpayers should be paying her meals on the plane because she can't simply make do with coal, camembert, and broken crackers. What hardship. People need to understand that they're not elected, those senators, nor are they accountable. They are the privileged friends of the Liberals and the Conservatives. Mr. Speaker, when will the Senate be abolished? As you know, Mr. Speaker, the Senate is under investigation by the Auditor General for their expenses.
At the same time, there's been an investigation in this House, and it has been discovered that the NDP owes $2.7 million for illegal offices, over $1 million for illegal advertising, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage the NDP to repay back the millions of dollars in illegal expenses that they accepted, Mr. Speaker. Don't wait. This is a party that has a history of being found guilty, Mr. Speaker, whether it's accepting illegal union donations or robocalls, Mr. Speaker. But here they have an opportunity to repay the $3 million.
The honourable member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, there's a major disconnect between what we're hearing coming out of the Senate and the serious issues that Canadians face on a daily basis. Very soon, the government is going to face a situation where many senators may end up in the same boat as Mike Duffy and Pamela Wallin. What's the government's plan? What are they planning to do to the Senate?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary.
Again, Mr. Speaker, as I just said, obviously it was the Senate that invited in the Auditor General to review all of the expenses of the Senate, Mr. Speaker. We thought that was a good step to take, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we also know that there's 67 members of the NDP who have been found guilty of illegally using House resources, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage them to repay it back. I know a lot of them think that that's actually funny, that owing the taxpayers close to $4 million is a funny thing. I can tell you this. Taxpayers don't think it's funny, and they think they should just simply do the right thing and pay it back.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are making progress. They finally came up with a date for the budget. Now they need to come up with some real solutions to help Canadian families. The promise to change the UCCB is a smokescreen. According to the PBO, families with no expenses for childcare are getting the most. Why not instead invest that money in a childcare service that would really help families?
Mr. Speaker, the insult to Canadian families just doesn't stop from that side of the House. To somehow suggest that families who are not using licensed daycare and paying a specific bill are not incurring costs to themselves, you are completely out of touch with Canadian families. We're going to increase it. We're going to expand it. Listen to Canadian families.
The honourable member for Newton North Delta.
Talking about out of touch. Canadian families know they won't be getting the help they desperately need from the Conservative budget. Instead of moving forward with the NDP's plan for affordable childcare available to all families, the Conservatives are happy to push forward their income-splitting scheme that will only see the wealthiest families in the country benefit. Will the Conservatives drop their regressive income-splitting plan and put forward in their budget a solution that helps all Canadian families?
The Honourable Minister of State.
Mr. Speaker, the evidence shows that only about 10% of all Canadian families use licensed or regulated daycare spaces. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the only people their plan would help. Mr. Speaker, our plan helps every Canadian family because Canadian families want to use a variety of options when it comes to caring for their children, and they are all incurring costs. To suggest that Canadian families, when they decide one parent will stay at home or they will use another family member, that they are not incurring costs, that's absolutely absurd. It's wrong. Our plan helps every Canadian family in Canada with children.
Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-des-Basques. Mr. Speaker, the action by the Conservatives often raises more questions than provides answers. The NEB announced it was laying off 15% of its staff at a time when the number of energy projects in the country is on the rise. The confidence of Canadians as regards the safe transport of oil is collapsing, especially with the gutting of environmental standards undertaken by this Conservative government. So how can the government justify new cuts when the safety of Canadians is at stake?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite should quit misleading Canadians. To be clear, there are no cuts to the National Energy Board. Our government has a proven track record of increasing funding to the NEB and providing it with the resources that it needs to operate. That's right. What's the member opposite have to have a proven record of, Mr. Speaker? Voting against the increased funding for the NEB at every time that it's been proposed. That's right.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, there are cuts, and it just doesn't make any sense because cutting 24% of the National Energy Board's resources when they actually need more oversight and more resources, well, it's just plain wrong. Provinces have serious concerns about the NEB's capacity, and so do local communities across this country. So how can Canadians trust that their safety is the #1 priority of this government when these cuts are going ahead?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, as I just said, there are no cuts to the National Energy Board. What do the members opposite do, Mr. Speaker? They vote against increasing inspections. They voted against increasing audits. They voted against implementing fines against companies that break the law. We'll take no lectures from them about the proper regulatory structure that we need in this country to protect these projects and the environment.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. The Minister of Defence continues to make more and more mistakes. He was forced to admit that he didn't have the information to justify Canada's participation in Iraq and Syria. Except that on a file as important as that, Canadians expect a minimum of professionalism from the minister. The cost of the war will hit $528 million by the end of the year, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister finally take his job seriously and verify the information before making those kinds of statements? Mr. Speaker, last week I disclosed the cost estimates for Operation Impact against the genocidal terrorist organization, ISIL, the additional costs of some $400 million. So, Mr. Speaker, we believe that these expenditures are justified given the threat that the Islamic State represents for Canadians and on the international scale. We must clearly combat this threat, and that is what we are doing now in Iraq with our Canadian forces.
For St. John's East.
Speaker, the Minister of National Defence says he regrets inaccurate information
being put into the public domain regarding Syria. Though he made no apology for his statements, nor about his claim that Canada was asked to extend the mission to Syria because we were the only country with precision-guided munitions, even though there were actually a dozen. Wow. Who made this request to the minister? Did it even happen? Why did this government use false information to justify Canada's decision to expand bombing into Syria?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, again, I reported publicly the information that I received in briefings from the Canadian military. As the CDS has said, when new information came to light, he corrected the record. As Minister, ultimately, I'm responsible for all information provided to the Department, and I do regret that inaccurate information was provided. Having said that, the real reason, of course, that we are now preparing to strike ISIL targets in Syria is so that that genocidal terrorist organization does not have a safe haven in which to plan terrorist attacks against Iraq or other countries, including Canada. Mr. Speaker, we're doing the right thing by taking on this genocidal terrorist organization.
The Honourable Member for Sackville Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, in the recent legislation brought forward by the government when it came to caregivers for our veterans, unfortunately falls woefully inadequate, Mr. Speaker. They identify possibly 250 caregivers by 2020 may be able to receive a $7,000 grant. But, Mr. Speaker, if a woman has to quit her full-time job to provide 24-hour round-the-clock care for the heroes of our country, they require more financial resources than a $7,000 stipend. So would the Parliamentary Secretary for the government, for Veterans Affairs, please advise, would they be willing to not only change their criteria of whose definition of a caregiver, but also would they increase the amount?
Order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Veterans Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Family Relief Caregiver Benefit is an important new benefit that recognizes the vital contribution of informal caregivers to the health and well-being of veterans with a severe and permanent service-related injury. The proposed new Family Caregiver Relief Benefit will provide veterans with an annual tax-free grant of more than $7,000. This new benefit will require little to no paperwork, and it will not require receipts. It will provide the informal caregiver relief while ensuring that veterans continue to get the support that they need. This is an important new initiative that the opposition should support, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for York West.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we discovered a $9 million cut to the youth employment strategy, and in other news, Conservatives found $7.5 million to spend on more wasteful ads. Well, Conservatives seem set on a strategy that moves money from helping the unemployed to phony ads that tell the unemployed that they're being helped. That's right. Conservatives spend widely on self-promotion during hockey playoffs and the Super Bowl, but yet cry poverty when it comes to real job creation. When are the Conservatives going to stop being more interested in selling themselves than in helping find real...
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, there are two parts to the question. Let's start with jobs. Jobs for young people. Our government brought in place the Canada Apprenticeship Grant, which helps young people get into the trades. High demand fields that pay good salaries to our young people and gives them a brighter future. There have been 500,000 of these grants that have already gone out to help young people. The Liberals oppose that. On advertising, we are advertising the increased universal child care benefit, the thousands of dollars that families will save through income splitting. The Liberals don't want those families to know about those benefits because the Liberals would take it away.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Louis. Economic confidence is measured by the health of the retail sector. A Future Shop store and a Target store are closing in my riding, and they're both less than a kilometre apart. These closures are leaving a gaping hole in the local economy. The government has undermined the confidence of consumers and businesses through this late and inadequate action. When will the government finally take steps that are commensurate with the economic challenges Canadians are currently facing?
Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, the worst way of helping retailers is by increasing taxes on families. If families have more money in their pockets, they can purchase goods, buy services from retailers, and that creates jobs. So that's why, Mr. Speaker, we've increased the UCCB. We've up to $2,000 for children under 6 and up to $720 for children aged 6 to 17. The Liberals voted against that. They want to withdraw or take that money away from Canadians, increase taxes, and we're not going to allow them to do that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government's failure to be able to create jobs over the last couple of years has led to Canada's economy shrinking, and that's the bottom line, Mr. Speaker. That has been very hard on the middle class of Canada. Mr. Speaker, I drive around Winnipeg, and what you will see is Safeways are disappearing, Target stores are closed down, Future Shop is closed down. This government does not even understand the importance of economic growth and creating jobs, Mr. Speaker. My question to the government is, when is the Liberal Party and when is Canadians going to start to see a plan that's going to generate the jobs that are so important to our middle class?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, their only plan is to raise taxes on families that shop at these retailers. You don't create jobs for retailers by taxing the people who buy their goods. We're doing exactly the opposite on this side of the House of Commons. We have lowered taxes for small businesses so that they can afford to hire more. We've lowered taxes for families so that they can afford to spend at their local businesses. And we are training our young people for the jobs that actually exist. Good, solid, well-paid jobs for our young people through quality training. The Liberals opposed all of it, and that's why Canadians side with it.
The Honourable Member for Alfred Belin. The more people hear about C-51, the more they oppose it. 90% of all the witnesses who appeared before the committee agreed that C-51 is dangerous to our rights and freedoms. And there are a number of parties that have changed their minds and are now following the leadership of the NDP. Only the leader of the third party is letting the Prime Minister win instead of having principles. Will the ministers see the consensus against this bad bill and the need to withdraw C-51? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the members of the committee who did important work over the last few weeks and who heard from dozens of witnesses over many hours, and all recognize that it's important to ensure that terrorists don't profit from the inability of government agencies to share information, or that we prevent terrorists from getting on airplanes, or that we shut down terrorist propaganda online, or that we make it possible to arrest potential terrorists. We are protecting Canadians' safety.
Speaker, it's no wonder the Conservatives rushed C-51 through. They couldn't stand the opposition coming even from their own base. The more Canadians have heard about C-51, the more they oppose it. Even the Bloc has seen the light and won't vote for this dangerous legislation. And maybe even the Liberal leader will follow. But my question is for the Minister. After hearing overwhelming evidence that C-51 is ineffective and poses a threat to our civil liberties, will he listen to Canadians and abandon this fatally flawed bill?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, there are so many good measures and check and balances in this bill that I want also to thank the member for having taken the time to listen to witnesses such as the sister of a warrant officer, Patrice Vincent, or the member of the Muslim community, or again from the security or from academic as well, Mr. Speaker. And all agree that it is important that we ensure that we have threat diminishment measure, Mr. Speaker, so that we are able to prevent terrorists from using the gaps in our law to harm Canadians, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member, and we can reassure Canadians that we are taking the measure necessary to protect them against the terrorists.
The Honourable Member for Beaches East York.
Mr. Speaker, Toronto Mayor John Tory and 17 Toronto City Councillors whose constituents border the CP rail line have written to the Minister of Transport expressing their concerns about the transportation of dangerous goods through their neighbourhoods. With about 1 million barrels of oil going through Canadian towns and cities daily, with derailments across this country continually in the news, with Lac-Mégantic never far from our minds, is this minister going to listen to the concerns of Torontonians, implement the recommendations in this letter, and prevent another catastrophe?
Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that we have received the letter. We've encouraged
the municipality to work with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, with whom we have a very strong relationship, in working on their rail advisory group. I meet with them at least 3 to 4 times a year, taking their concerns into great consideration as we continuously improve rail safety in the country. We have acted on their recommendations. They have indicated they're in agreement with the direction we're taking, and I value their relationship.
Honourable member for Brassard-La Prairie. The Conservatives are still dragging their feet, Mr. Speaker, to prevent other derailments like the recent derailments in Gogama, the 4th in Northern Ontario. Since the beginning of the year, we've learned that CN will be reducing the speed of its trains that are transporting oil across the country. CN seems to be learning from its mistakes. What is the minister waiting for to show leadership and impose similar measures to the entire rail network?
Mr. Speaker, we are very proud of what we've accomplished as a government with respect to the improvements in rail safety in this country. It really has been unprecedented, and I'd encourage the honourable member to actually read what we have done so far, because it would save me the embarrassment of having to point out to him that we already did exactly that in an emergency directive last year.
The honourable member for Nipissing-Temiskaming.
When it comes to protecting our streets and communities, Canadians know they can trust. Since 2006, we've toughened laws, held violent criminals to account, and most importantly, stood up for victims of crime. In response to the Supreme Court's decision in Bedford, we brought in new criminal provisions to protect vulnerable Canadians from the harms of prostitution. The opposition dragged their feet and ultimately voted against the legislation. Could the Minister of Justice tell this House the kind of impact our legislation is having on our communities?
The Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member from Temiskaming and Nipissing, and I want to congratulate members of the RCMP who recently conducted raids to break up an international prostitution ring. They identified hundreds of potential victims who were being forced into prostitution, an inherently dangerous life. At least 500 victims, mostly young women, were moved around the country and forced into sexual slavery in many Canadian cities. Through the investigation, although it's ongoing, 6 individuals have been charged in charges recently enacted by our government. Canadians trust this government to protect Canadians in our communities where they work, live, and raise their families.
The honourable member for Montmagny-Lilley, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. The Economic Development Agency for the Regions of Quebec exists to help create jobs in our regions. But the report on plans and priorities tabled yesterday by the government shows that the Conservatives plan to cut again $20 million from the agency's budget by 2018. $20 million, that's almost 10% of the agency's budget, and that's on top of the tens of millions of dollars that go unspent every year by this government. How can the minister justify these cuts? Well, thousands of Quebecers in the regions are losing their jobs. They're looking for jobs without finding any. This is unjustifiable. How are they justifying this decision? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to share with my colleagues some of the things that economic development has done since 2006. Imagine 530 projects funded, over $2.3 billion in contributions approved, over $9 billion in total investments. I think that Economic Development Canada is doing its job to improve the economy of Quebec. The Honourable Member for Beauharnois-Salaberry. I don't think we have the same numbers here, Mr. Speaker. If the regions prosper, all of Quebec prospers, but the Conservatives are cutting almost $12 million from the Business Development Program at the Agency for the Regions of Quebec, along with almost $2 million in support for entrepreneurs and $3 million in support for the CEDEX and community economic development in Quebec. Why are the Conservatives doing everything they can to destroy small businesses in our regions? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For 2011 to 2014, Economic Development Canada allocated $1.5 billion to the regions. Of that, 98% was invested to meet the needs of the regions. Unfortunately, the NDP always voted against these budgets that brought money for economic development of Canada in Quebec.
Member for Parkdale,
report from York University legal researchers says Hungarian Roma who came to Canada claiming refugee status have encountered systemic bias at Immigration Canada and unfair treatment by this government, despite increasing persecution and danger in their home countries. Between 2008 and 2012, only 8.6% of the more than 11,000 Roma refugee claimants were successful. Mr. Speaker, these systemic failures must be fixed. Will this government stop mistreating the Roma and denying them refuge?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, Canada continues to have the most generous immigration refugee determination system in the world, and every country on the designated country of origin list demonstrates respect for human rights, offers state protection to those whose human rights are violated, and has mechanisms for redress if these rights are infringed. Mr. Speaker, it is not an accident that almost every country of the European Union is on the DCO list. The decisions the member is talking about were made by highly trained civil servants who follow our immigration laws. Our just and immigration rules are applied impartially based on the facts, Mr. Speaker, and we're not going to politicize these issues as the opposition would have us do.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, a family in Vancouver Kingsway is attempting to adopt their orphaned nephew who lives in Delhi, India. This child has no relatives left in India, and his uncle and aunt have already waited a year since applying to reunite their family. Yet, unbelievably, Immigration Canada says the adoption process will take another 31 months. Mr. Speaker, an immigration system that forces families to wait 4 years to adopt an orphaned child relative is simply unacceptable. Will the minister look into this case immediately and fix this broken system for all Canadian families? Doesn't sound generous to me.
The Honourable Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite knows very well that he does a disservice to families affected by individual cases, worried about their files when he raises those issues before this House of Commons. We cannot talk about those issues in this place rightfully due to the restrictions of the Privacy Act. If he wants to talk about these issues, he should raise them outside of the House. Canada has the most generous immigration system, and we are among the leading countries in the world making adoptions happen, Mr. Speaker, resettling refugees. The honourable member knows that.
The Honourable Member for Trinity Spadina.
Mr. Speaker, this government's just renewed an anemic housing agreement with the province of Ontario. The province said thank you because it's got good manners, not because it's a good policy. In Toronto, this policy means that only 60 new units of apartments will be built in the next year, even though there's a waiting list in the city of 92,000 people waiting for housing. The Mayor of Toronto said this week that he needs more help, not the status quo. In fact, the city is now losing almost 250 units of housing a year while they wait for the federal government to act. But the question is this: why is the finance minister going to Toronto and speaking at a private club, making one of his colleagues rich, instead of being in this House, providing housing money and helping people in need?
Exactly. The Honourable Minister of State.
Well, first of all, I didn't realize that member now speaks for the provincial government of Ontario, because I can tell you that when I met and signed agreements with the Minister of Housing from Ontario, they are very pleased with our housing agreements. And you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because we provide funding, they match funding, and then they decide where the funding goes, Mr. Speaker. It's called working with the provinces. It's called doing our role, making our role as the federal government having the greatest impact, but working with provinces. I'd like to explain that to that member. I think he would understand it if we have a little more time to explain that simple matter to him.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra.
Last month, I asked about reservist leading seaman Robin Young. She was misdiagnosed and injured by a military doctor, and so she lost her health, she lost her job, and she lost her benefits. The minister said he would do everything possible to help, but he did not. Last week, I asked again. The minister said he would do everything possible to help, but again, he has not. This brave soldier and her mom will be homeless in just 2 weeks. Why doesn't the minister just keep his word to Robin?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I've instructed the Armed Forces to cover all of Ms. Young's medical expenses related to her present condition, going back to before DNT was even aware of that condition. My instruction was clear. This is to continue regardless of the outcome of the current review. In fact, the Armed Forces covered the cost of her relocation to British Columbia and provided her with interim housing upon her move. If there are any other outstanding medical claims, we encourage her to submit them to the Armed Forces, who are providing full support for her medical and rehabilitation costs. I've also instructed officials to treat all of Leading Seaman Young's requests as a priority and provide her with everything that can be made available to her.
The honourable member for Thunder Bay, Rainy River.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thunder Bay city officials have announced that the federal government has rejected a gas tax fund request for the proposed Thunder Bay Event Centre. Now, this rejection comes despite the federal government already spending more than $800,000 on the project. The FedNor minister says the city is confused. Will the infrastructure minister provide clarification about his decision, and will he pledge to work together with the City Council so that Thunder Bay can access gas tax funding for this or other projects?
The Honourable Minister, Permanent Secretary for Foreign
Mr. Speaker, our government's Building Canada plan is the largest infrastructure program in our country's history. We provided the City of Thunder Bay the finances necessary to complete the detailed design and schematics for the proposed new event and convention centre, and further support will be contingent on the proposal being consistent with the criteria for funding established by the Province of Ontario and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, which came into effect last year.
The honourable member for Chambly-Beaudoin. Mr. Speaker, the excessive speed of boats on the Richelieu River is causing a nuisance, is dangerous for swimmers and paddle sports, and is accelerating erosion of the riverbanks. All of the mayors in the Richelieu Valley have joined with me and my provincial colleague in asking for the Minister of Transport to simplify the overcomplicated federal regulations. They're much too complicated. Is the minister ready to help us listen to the regional consensus and adopt a speed limit for boats on the Richelieu River?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I should let the honourable member know that I have brought this up with my officials already. They're looking into the matter with respect to process. But I'd also like to say, Mr. Speaker, how refreshing for the member of the opposition to seek less red tape and less regulation. Kind of a break from
the honourable member for Pickering Scarborough East.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday, our government introduced the Support for Veterans and Their Families Act to recognize and fulfill the obligation of the people and government of Canada to show just and due appreciation to members and veterans for their service to Canada. But veterans and their families are already seeing results. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veteran Affairs please update this House on the progress we are continuing to make for veterans and their families?
The Honourable Parliament.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Pickering Scarborough East for his hard work for our veterans. Of the 5 great initiatives announced by the Minister of Veterans Affairs to improve benefits for injured veterans, 2 have already come into effect. Effective April 1st, we have expanded the eligibility criteria for the permanent impairment allowance so that more veterans are eligible for financial support each month. And also effective April 1st, the earnings loss benefit is now calculated in the same way for reserve force veterans as it is for regular force veterans, and this is all about respect for veterans. Mr. Speaker, I encourage the opposition to support these initiatives and our other government initiatives. Thank you, Mr.
The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs made an appeal for clemency for Raif Badawi. But simply appealing for clemency won't lead to his immediate and unconditional release, nor his reunification with his family in Quebec. Will the government explicitly demand the immediate unconditional release of Raif Badawi, as requested by the motion passed unanimously yesterday by this House, so that Mr. Badawi can be reunited with his family here in Quebec?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with the passage of the motion, that's exactly what we are doing. We consider the punishment of Mr. Badawi to be a violation of human dignity. There have been representations made to the ambassador, to the government, and the government will continue.
The honourable member for La Salle-Mar. New regulations proposed by the Conservatives are a major concern to the mutual insurance sector because these new regulations will create 2 classes of policyholders. Why is the government not requiring that all policyholders be treated fairly or that capital be invested in communities. Why are the Conservatives, with these new regulations, threatening the future of mutual insurance companies by putting in place incentives that could lead to demutualization?
Mr. Speaker, I know that the mutual insurance industry has made its concerns about this issue very clear to the government. Of course, the primary questions here are of a provincial nature. However, we are, of course, in dialogue with the industry, and I know that the Minister of Finance is following this very closely.
The honourable member for Vancouver South.
The Budget Officer confirmed that our family tax cut and universal childcare benefit will put more money into the pockets of every Canadian family with children. The PBO also confirmed that these benefits are progressive, helping the lowest income families the most. Can the Minister of State for Social Development please inform the House about why the government believes that all families deserve support?
The Honourable Minister of State.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member from Vancouver South for the great work and the very good question. Mr. Speaker, PBO did report definitely that our benefits help lower to middle-income families the most, which is what we've been saying. He also confirmed that every Canadian family with children will benefit. We recognize, Mr. Speaker, there's no two families that are alike in Canada when it comes to the needs and the decisions that they make regarding childcare. So we'll continue to support all Canadian families. While the NDP plan leaves out 90% of Canadian families, will support all Canadian families.
The honourable member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel. Mr. Speaker, palliative care is inaccessible to most Canadians. Today, only 15% of Canadians have access to palliative care in a hospital. An initiative that was in the budget for 2011 ended in March. After 3 years of consultation, will the minister finally put in place a new plan in collaboration with the provinces for new palliative care?
Parliamentary Secretary for Health.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member raises a really good point around palliative care and the real challenges that are faced by families as they deal with this very difficult time in their lives. I think it's important to know, of course, the provinces are responsible for health care, and we have record high transfers. They're going to be $70 billion by the end of the decade. But the federal government also has an important role, and I think since 2006, it's important to know that we've invested more than $43 million in research, and those are going to provide much-needed support and information for the provinces.
The honourable member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel.
Consulting is now over. The action needs to be taken. End-of-life care is an essential health care need. If the health minister needs help, Quebec has already legislated in Bill C-52, which states that palliative care should be a legislative right. Canadians should be guaranteed palliative care when they need it, and the consequences of failing to provide such care should give Canadians ground for legal action. Several countries like Germany, France, and Italy have legally provided citizens this right. It's urgent that this government offer more support for nursing home, caregivers, and home palliative care as our hospitals are unable to meet demand. When will the Minister of Health take action?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I think the record high transfers to the provinces so that they can actually deliver, which they're constitutionally obliged to do. But I think on top of the money that we've spent on research, we do play a really important partnership role. Another example of something that we've done is the $6 million to the Pallium Foundation, and that provided palliative care training for healthcare providers. So again, important for us to work in partnerships with the provinces who deliver healthcare, but we can provide them much valued information around research, and again, things like the recent budget in terms of Pallium. Thank you.
This concludes question period for today. Happy Easter all. Mr. Jordan is on his feet. The Honourable NDP House Leaders rising on point of order?
No, Mr. Speaker, rising for the Thursday question.
Pardon me, I was felt like Friday there for a moment. The Honourable NDP House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We certainly learned this week what Conservatives are really concerned about. Is it the 400,000 manufacturing jobs that have been lost in this country? No, it's not that. Is it the lack of access to childcare across this country? No, it's not that, Mr. Speaker. What concerns Conservatives, and this was reported by a member of the National Conservative Caucus, is the temperature of their cheese, Mr. Speaker. These Camembert Conservatives are more interested in that than they are on fundamental issues. And, Mr. Speaker, what we'd like to suggest to them is that they should be more concerned about the atrocious state of the Canadian economy, as the head of the Bank of Canada said. They should be more concerned about the record debt load that Canadian families are experiencing. People say Tory times are tough times. Well, here's a very much proof for the average Canadian family. They should be concerned, of course, about cuts to food safety and rail safety on their watch that left, tragically, the death of dozens of Canadians. And they should be concerned about 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women, Mr. Speaker. Those are issues that I think most Canadians believe the government should be concerned about. And the good news, Mr. Speaker, is that there is only 200 days today to the end of this government on October 19th. Only 200 more days before Canadians will actually be able to judge this government on their lack of concern for these issues that deal with Canadians. And, Mr. Speaker, I have the utmost confidence in October 19th Canadians will make the right choice, and they will say no to this government and yes to a new NDP government that will actually put their priorities first, Mr. Speaker. So with that, we've been told that the budget, not announced in the House, of course, but announced somewhere way away. We haven't seen the Finance Minister respond to questions here for months. I don't know if it's because he didn't like the temperature of the cheese or what, Mr. Speaker, but he hasn't been here. I certainly hope he'll actually be here to present a budget, and we hope that the budget will actually reflect Canadians' priorities. And so, on that note, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish you and all Canadians a very happy Easter. Joyeuse Pâques à tout le monde au Canada.
Happy Easter to everyone in Canada. And I would ask my colleague, what are the government's priorities for the week following the Easter break?
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon we will conclude the second reading debate on Bill C-42, the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act. This bill will reduce the red tape faced by law-abiding hunters, farmers, and outdoors enthusiasts. And then we will return to our constituencies for the Easter adjournment. And when we come back, on Monday, April 20th, it will be the first allotted day. And the House will debate a proposal from the New Democratic Party. And this proposal will be the 81st, I expect, time-allocated opposition day debate since the last election. Because, as you know, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the option available to them to allow many days of debate of any issues they raise under opposition days, the NDP has always chosen to limit the debate to the minimum of a single debate. What's more, Mr. Speaker, this will be the 179th time-allocated opposition debate since the government took place on an opposition day. Now, on Tuesday, we will debate and ideally conclude third reading of Bill C-12, the Drug-Free Prisons Act, and then we will move on to the report stage of Bill S-2, the Incorporation by Reference and Regulations Act. Now, as my honourable friend, the Minister of Finance, said this week, and I don't know where the opposition House Leader was, but I quite enjoyed the Minister of Finance's answers this week in question period. I know why he doesn't remember it, because he doesn't want to remember it, because, of course, he laid on the table the clear choices before Canadians between a government that's focused on the priorities of Canadians, lower taxes for families, and the priorities of the New Democrats to raise those taxes on families, to reverse the tax reductions our government has delivered, and to deliver higher debt, higher deficits, and bigger government. It's a clear choice, and, of course, that's why we look so forward to the budget on Tuesday, April 21st, that the Finance Minister has announced will take place. And that will be at 4 p.m. So on his behalf, Mr. Speaker, and pursuant to Standing Order 83 sub 2, I ask that an order of the day be designated for the purpose of that budget. I'm looking forward to that balanced budget because it will continue our focus on creating jobs and supporting Canadian families. Over 1.2 million net new jobs since the economic downturn, a remarkable record, especially contrasted with every other developed country in the world, something of which I know Canadians are remarkably proud, and they recognize the importance of the economic leadership we've had from the Finance Minister and our Prime Minister in delivering those results, and that's why, of course, there is such strong support for our economic agenda in contrast with that offered by the New Democratic Party. Le débat sur le budget se poursuit.
The debate on the budget will continue on Wednesday. Subject to discussions with my counterparts, the second day of debate will be on Friday. Meanwhile, on Thursday, we will debate Bill C-51, the Anti-Terrorism Act 2015, at report stage. This important bill provides our law enforcement and security agencies with crucial tools to tackle new and emerging threats posed by terrorists. Over the last several weeks, our hard-working Public Safety Committee held many hours of meetings, hearing from dozens of witnesses, and then a very long day spent on the bill's clause-by-clause consideration. Let me congratulate and thank the committee for its efforts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture and Natural Resources. For National Revenue.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food and the Minister of International Trade, pursuant to Standing Order 32.2 and in accordance with Standing Order 109, I'm pleased to present in both official languages the Government's response to the 7th report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, entitled Canadian Agriculture and the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, which was tabled in the House of Commons on December 10, 2014. The Government response addresses the motion adopted by this House on November 19, 2014, which asked the committee to reconsider its earlier report on the Canada-EU Pact now that the final agreement has been reached. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliament Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36.8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the Government's responses to 12 petitions.
Tabling of documents. Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Presenting reports from committees, the Honourable Member for Prince Edward Hastings.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I have the honour to present in both official languages the 10th report of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security in relation to Bill C-51, an act to amend the Security of Canada Information Sharing Act and the Secure Air Travel Act, to amend the Criminal Code, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act, and the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts. The committee has studied this bill, Mr. Speaker, and has decided to report the bill back to the House with amendments.
Reports from committees. The Honourable Member for Leeds-Grenville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour to present in both official languages the 11th report of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage in relation to Bill S-219, Journey to Freedom Day Act. Mr. Speaker, the committee has studied the bill and has decided to report the bill back to the House without amendment. Thank you very much.
Dépôt des projets de loi.
Introduction of private members' bills. Ms. Day, seconded by Ms. Doré-Lefebvre, seeks permission to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bank Act, the Cooperative Credit Associations Act, and the Trust and Loan Companies Act, charges for keeping an account in Canada. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to rise in the House today to table a bill to amend the Bank Act, the Cooperative Credit Associations Act, and the Trust and Loan Companies Act, charges for keeping up an account in Canada. More specifically, we want to reduce the excessive banking fees that are charged. First, banks will be required to be more transparent. All banks will have to report annually on all fees they charge their customers and on the true cost of the services for which those fees were charged. In addition, banks will have to better communicate with their customers by giving them a grace period before charging for bounced checks. Our goal, Mr. Speaker, is to regulate the banks so as to put an end to gouging by the banks, because customers are having enough trouble making ends meet. We can do better for families. I hope all my colleagues will support this initiative enthusiastically. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ms. Day, seconded by Ms. Doré-Lefebvre, moves that this bill be now read a first time and printed.
Cette motion
The motion's deemed adopted. When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House.
Introduction of government bills. Mr. Scarpaleccia, seconded by Mr. Vaughan, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Department of Health Act Drinking Water Standards. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Lac Saint Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to rise in the House to table this bill to strengthen the federal government's ability to show greater leadership and to ensure that higher standards apply to drinking water in Canada. The bill would require Health Canada to examine drinking water standards adopted by OECD countries in order to determine whether those standards would provide better protection for health than the Canadian standards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Scarpaleccia, seconded by Mr. Vaughan, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill. Comme lecture de ce projet de loi.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Before I resume with private members' bills, just want to clarify for the record that this was private members' bills being introduced, not government bills. Ms. Nash, seconded by Mr. Christofferson, moves for leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bank Act International Remittance Transfer Fees. This motion is deemed adopted. The Honourable Member for Parkdale High Park.
Mr. Speaker, today I'm proud to introduce my bill, An Act to Amend the National Bank Act International Remittance Transfer Fees. Newcomers, when they come to Canada, they leave behind family members, children, spouses, siblings, and they often work for low wages, and yet they take some of those low wages and send them back to their country of origin. This Act will cap the fees banks can charge on personal remittance transfers to 5% of the total value of the transfer. When Canadians send money back to their relatives and loved ones, they face fees of often 10, 15, or even 20% of the value. This takes money away from their meager wages and often forces them to work extra hours to pay the fees. By capping the rate charged at the percentage of the total cost, low-income Canadians sending small amounts of money won't have their remittances eroded, allowing more money to be received for education, food, or even a toy for their children. We urge all members, when this comes up for debate, to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Nash, seconded by Mr. Christofferson, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill. Comme lecture de ce projet de loi.
And when shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Any further private members' bills? First reading of Senate public bills, motions, presenting petitions. L'Honorable Député de Sherbrooke.
The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour to table a petition signed by over 100 Sherbrookeers calling for the release of Mr. Badawi, and moreover that the federal government should use all means at its disposal, including diplomatic means, to secure Mr. Badawi's release. He's been jailed simply for expressing his opinions on a blog. And so on behalf of those residents of Sherbrooke, I'd like to table this petition, and hopefully we'll get a response from the government quickly. That's what the signatories hope for.
School violence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to rise today to present two petitions. The first is over 1,000 signatures from British Columbia residents, as well as Ontarians, and quite a few from my own riding of Saanich Gulf Islands, urging this House to reject the so-called Anti-Terrorism Act, Bill C-51. I heard moments ago the chair of the committee say that they studied the bill. I sat through the hearings, Mr. Speaker. I don't think the bill was properly studied at all, and I think these petitioners' petitions should get the attention of all here present. The second petition, Mr. Speaker, is thousands of signatures from petitioners from across Canada, particularly in the Victoria area, calling for justice and respect for the human rights of Falun Gong practitioners who are subject to extraordinary abuse and imprisonment in the People's Republic of China.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Palliser.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present two petitions, with both of them being signed by Canadians, with many of them being from Cairnport, which is within my riding in Palliser. The first petition outlines that Canada is the only Western nation without a law on abortion, making it in the company of China and North Korea. They state that the Supreme Court of Canada has declared that it is the responsibility of Parliament to enact abortion legislation. The second petition calls upon Parliament to condemn the discrimination against girls through sex-selective abortions and to do all it can to prevent sex-selective abortions from being carried out in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The presenting petitions, the honourable member for Beaches East York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Pleased to present a petition today in support of a national urban agenda. The signatories to the petition note that it is through our cities that we connect to and participate in the global economy, and yet our cities are places of increasing income inequality. They further note that 80% of Canadians live in urban communities and that we can't have the Canada we want if we don't have the cities we want. They therefore call upon the Government of Canada, Mr. Speaker, to do its part to build into our cities the infrastructure necessary to ensure that Canada's cities are prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Mount Royal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to present two petitions. The first calls upon the government to adopt aid policies and programs in support of and in consultation with small family farmers, especially women, and that they protect the rights of small family farmers in the global south to preserve, use and freely exchange seeds which are being replaced and imperiled by patented industrial varieties. The second petition, Mr. Speaker, calls upon the government and the House to examine the possibility of public dental care in Canada parallel to the private system, and the petitioners remind us that as many as 6 million Canadians are not able to afford the dental care they need, and that oral health care can in fact be a matter of life and death. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to present hundreds of more petitioners to add to the thousands of Canadians across Canada who are calling on this government to preserve Canada Post's home delivery program and to stop the plan for reduced services, including the elimination of home delivery for 5 million households, as well as a dramatic increase in postal rates. The petitioners point out that by taking away home delivery of mail, it increases the risk of theft to mail, it harms seniors and people who have mobility issues, and also they point out that Canada Post helps taxpayers making a profit for 17 out of 18 of the last years. The second petition I have, Mr. Speaker, is one by people who are concerned about persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in the People's Republic of China, and they call on this government to uphold the principles of human rights and the ability of people to freely practice their spiritual and religious faith wherever they may be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Petitions, the honourable member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, autism spectrum disorders, or ASDs, affect one person in 88. These disorders are characterized by social and communication challenges and a pattern of repetitive behaviors and interests. They are lifelong, affect development and life experience, and exert emotional and financial pressure on families. The petitioners call on the government to work with the provinces and territories and stakeholders to develop a pan-Canadian strategy for autism spectrum disorder.
Presenting petitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliament Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, question number Q1055 will be answered today. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, questions number Q1058, 1060, 1062, 1064, 1065, 1070, 1073, 1082, and 1085 could be made orders for returns. These returns would be tabled immediately.
Is the pleasure of the House that questions number Q 1058, 1060, 1062, 1064, 1065, 1070, 1073, 1082, and 1085 be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately? Agreed and so ordered. Parliament Secretary.
Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the remaining questions be allowed to stand.
So ordered. Agreed and so ordered. Requests for emergency debates. Orders of the day. I believe the honourable member for St. John South is rising on a point of personal privilege.
That would be St. John's East.
Oh, pardon me, St. John's East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I rise on a question of privilege pursuant to Standing Order 48 of the Standing Orders of the House of Commons. And this is a question of grave importance. It concerns misleading information that the Minister of Defence provided to the House regarding the expansion and extension of the Canadian military engagement in Iraq and now Syria. Information, Mr. Speaker, meant to form the basis on which members of Parliament decided how to vote on one of the most important questions that parliamentarians face, whether or not to put Canadian military personnel in harm's way. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely serious matter. As I've said before, misleading and false statements are not only a breach of the privileges that MPs must rely on in the performance of their duties as parliamentarians, but they are also a breach of the trust of Canadians who elected this Parliament to govern responsibly. Therefore, I will ask that you find that a prima facie case exists of privilege so that the matter can be further investigated in committee. Mr. Speaker, this House has spent much of the last 2 weeks debating the expansion of the government's war efforts in Iraq and Syria. Of course, the Minister of Defence was briefed extensively on the mission and Canada's role therein. Those who briefed the Minister are the very capable men and women of our armed forces, as well as those from the Departments of Defence and Foreign Affairs. And of course, the House and its members, the House and its members have been relying on the Minister of Defence and Foreign Affairs, as well as the Prime Minister, to provide the facts on which members of Parliament made their decision to support the extension and expansion of the mission. That motion passed earlier this week. Sadly, the information provided by the government on this mission over the past 6 months has far too often been proven false. Just 2 short months ago, I asked for the Prime Minister to be held to account for his misleading statements on the initial 6-month deployment of our troops in Iraq. You'll remember, Mr. Speaker, that he told the House last year, in direct contradiction to the truth, that Canadian Armed Forces personnel would not be accompanying Iraqi forces to the front line. Of course, we now know that not only are Canadian military personnel accompanying local forces to the front line, but we are also painting targets and taking fire on the front lines in direct combat with the ISIL forces, also contrary to the assertions of the Prime Minister. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are faced with yet another example of this government playing fast and loose with the truth and the facts on the issues surrounding Canadian involvement in the war. On Monday of this week, Mr. Speaker, the very day members of Parliament were asked to perform our most sacred duty of authorizing the deployment of Canadian forces into combat, the Minister said the following in response to direct questioning from the NDP. Quote, "The honourable member is wrong because the United States and Canada will be the only allied countries using precision-guided munitions to strike targets dynamically. That is a very important asset. That is one of the reasons why the United States encouraged Canada to broaden the scope of its military mission against the genocidal terrorist organization known as the Islamic State, namely so that we can hit those dynamic targets using our precision-guided missions, which are amongst the best in the world." He also said, in response to a question from me in my capacity as defence critic for the official opposition, that, quote, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the member for St. John's East is incorrect. The statement of the Chief of Defence Staff confirmed what I said, which was based on the advice I received from the military, indicating that currently only the United States is using precision-guided missiles of this nature against ISIL targets. Well, as we all know now, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't me that was incorrect, it was the Minister. And what's so disturbing about these misleading statements, Mr. Speaker, is that the Minister of Defence was using this, quote, fact as a key piece of evidence in the case for Canada's bombardment of Syria. On March 25th, he told the Canadian public, quote, there are only 5 coalition partners doing airstrikes against ISIL terror targets in eastern Syria. The United States is the only one of those 5 that has precision-guided missiles. That is a capability the Royal Canadian Air Force has. So one of the reasons our allies have requested we expand our air sorties into eastern Syria is because with those precision-guided munitions our CF-18s carry, we can be more impactful in the strikes we make against ISIL. The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that each and every state that is currently engaged in airstrikes in Syria is using precision-guided munitions, every single one. In response to this assertion from the Minister, it was reported yesterday, and I quote, according to a spokesperson for the Combined Joint Task Force, which is leading the coalition bombing in Syria and Iraq, that's not even close to the case, unquote. Not even close to the case, Mr. Speaker. How could the Minister possibly have gotten that key piece of information so wrong? The CJTF spokesperson went on to say all coalition partner states doing airstrikes in Syria and Iraq are using precision-guided munitions and nothing else. In Syria, that includes 4 nations other than the U.S. In Iraq, it includes 8 nations other than the U.S., namely Australia, Belgium, Denmark, France, Jordan, the Netherlands, and the UK, in addition to Canada. All Canadians, including the loved ones of our soldiers, as well as the parliamentarians who were being asked to send them into harm's way, had a right to know the truth. And the Minister withheld that from them and instead provided information that even he now admits was 100% false. It's difficult to imagine, Mr. Speaker, what could possibly have happened to lead us to the point where the Minister was making such patently false assertions about the state of play in the theatres of engagement into which he was recommending we send our forces. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Minister has a duty to provide parliamentarians with accurate information on the mission. In your ruling, Speaker, against the member for Mississauga, Streetsville, on March 3, 2014, it was stated that there exists a, quote, primordial importance of accuracy and truthfulness in our deliberations, unquote. Never could this be more so than when facing a question of whether or not to send Canadian forces off to war. In this case, the Minister has a sacred duty to ensure that the statements he's making are true. And now that it is clear to this House that there's been such terrific breach of trust between his department and the Canadian people, including his colleagues here in the House of Commons, we too have a duty to find out what happened and why. I'm asking you today, Mr. Speaker, to defend these rights and our democratic institution by finding that there is a prima facie case of privilege and contempt of Parliament. For the sake of clarity, let me remind everyone here of the rights afforded to members of Parliament to carry out their duties on behalf of Canadians. On page 75 of the 23rd edition of Erskine May's Treatise on the Law, Privileges, Proceedings and Usages of Parliament, parliamentary privilege is defined as, and I quote, the sum of the peculiar rights enjoyed by each House collectively and by members of each House individually, without which they could not discharge their functions. Parliamentary privileges are of the utmost importance not only for parliamentarians, but also for Canadians who have put their trust and faith in Parliament to legislate on their behalf and to hold their government to account. Mr. Speaker, it is actually the essence of the democracy that we hold so dear. Canadians trust that we can perform our tasks unimpeded and unobstructed, and they trust that their government will provide truthful answers in this House. These are basic principles of paramount importance for Canadians to continue to believe and engage in our democratic process. Breaches of privileges can take many forms, but the one we are dealing with today, misleading the House, is one of the most serious. On page 111 of Erskine May, it states that, quote, the Commons may treat the making of a deliberately misleading statement as contempt. The second edition of the House of Commons Procedures and Practice by O'Brien and Bosk also tells us on page 111 that the provisions of deliberately misleading information constitutes a prima facie case of privilege. Mr. Speaker, if, as you have indicated in the past, we must take an honourable member at his word or her word, we must believe that the minister was in fact misled by his staff. While there's room to be personally sceptical about that fact, Mr. Speaker, accepting it does not diminish your ability to find that members' privileges have been breached. As you will know, Mr. Speaker, on December 6, 1978, in finding that a prima facie case of contempt of the House existed, Speaker Jerome ruled that a government official, by deliberately misleading a minister, had impeded the member in the performance of his duties and consequently obstructed the House itself. As you will also know, Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that Conservative MPs have been caught trying to validate their policies in the House with falsified information. When the member from Mississauga-Streetsville testified that he'd personally witnessed electoral malfeasance in very specific ways, only to stand a few days later to say that he had made the whole thing up, you found that the privileges of this House were violated. Yesterday, we witnessed the same routine from the Minister of Defence, standing in his place to say what he had asserted just 2 days earlier was in fact false. The Minister told us on Monday that our allies called to say they needed Canada, that they needed our uniquely precise weapons of munitions because they simply didn't have any of their own, that Canada's moral duty was to step in and fill in this gap in the war effort. 100% false, Mr. Speaker. The most difficult element we face here today, Mr. Speaker, is the House has already voted on the salient issue to which the Minister's misleading comments applied. That bell cannot be unrung. The Minister did take a moment yesterday to, I guess figuratively, throw the Chief of Defence Staff under the bus, but he, the Minister, still hasn't apologized for anything, including his role in advancing this monumental breakdown in intelligence. He said yesterday that it was all someone else's fault, that he, as the Minister, simply regretted that the information was placed in the public domain. Well, Mr. Speaker, I regret it too. In fact, I'm appalled. All MPs should be. We stood here and listened to the Minister heap scorn on those who dared question the veracity of his claims, and then were required to rely on his false evidence to make our individual decisions as members of Parliament to either approve or otherwise the dramatic expansion of this war effort. Surely we can all agree, Mr. Speaker, that this is a huge and serious problem. And perhaps if it were a one-off occurrence or even a two-off, Canadians could be persuaded to believe that it was an honest mistake. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, this government and this minister in particular has a well-established track record of playing fast and loose with the truth. Having done so once again in a debate over whether or not to send Canadian troops into battle, the time for reckoning is now upon us. Mr. Speaker, in your rulings on the various ways that the government has misled the House over the years, you have often emphasised the importance of the time-honoured tradition of accepting a member's word in this House. But that, I submit, is the very tradition that we are at risk of losing under the watch of this government. Now, obviously, when faced with tough questions from opposition or media, ministers have often found very creative ways to avoid inconvenient truths. We have obfuscation, we have omission of facts, we have bluster, bravado, and simply refusal to answer questions, and are all time-honoured traditions of this legislature and others. They are tactics that have been mastered by previous Conservative, Liberals, and Conservative governments for generations. But providing what is patently false information is quite a different matter. It's not only unethical, but against the rules of this place. The minister came into this place and, armed with faulty information, used that information as a key plank in his case for why he had to join, Canada had to join in the war effort in Syria. Members of Parliament used that faulty information to make their decision on whether or not to send Canadian troops into lethal combat. That cannot stand. The minister says the fiasco is the result of him being given a bad briefing or bad information. The Chief of Defence Staff has issued multiple and contradictory public statements to try to explain away this catastrophic failure of the minister in information being provided to the public and to this House. Surely, Mr. Speaker, surely this warrants study by the appropriate committee of this House to hear from the minister, to hear from the Chief of Defence Staff and others to determine exactly how members of Parliament could have been left in such a compromised position ahead of a vote to send Canada's brave men and women into battle in our names. They deserve no less, Mr. Speaker, and those are my comments in support of my request to have you determine that there's been a prima facie breach of the privileges of this House, and that it be studied by an appropriate committee of this House. And I would be prepared, sir, to move the appropriate motion if you so find. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of National Defence, rising on the same point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I respectfully submit in response to my honourable friend from St. John's that there is nothing approaching a prima facie case of privilege in the submissions that he just made to the chair. I would be happy, Mr. Speaker, for the record and for your consideration, to offer a brief summary of the relevant facts in response to claims made by the member opposite. As Minister of National Defence, in preparing to make recommendations to the Governor and Council with respect to a prospective expansion or extension of our military operation against ISIL, known as Operation Impact, I was briefed that Canada, the Royal Canadian Air Force, was furnished with precision-guided munitions that would be particularly useful in striking ISIL targets in Syria, and that currently only the United States military had similar and was using similar munitions in Syria. So it's true, Mr. Speaker, that I repeated the information which I had received, and I have to take responsibility for that. Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, well, I'll come to this, my comments yesterday in a moment. So, Mr. Speaker, the Governor and Council, the Cabinet, considered advice that I provided and made a decision on expansion and enlargement of the mission based overwhelmingly, Mr. Speaker, on the government's view that we ought not to allow the so-called Islamic State to have a safe haven to operate in eastern Syria in an area where it has de facto sovereignty, from an area from which it has launched an invasion of Iraq and terror attacks against Iraq, and indeed where the capital of ISIS is found. And that was the basis upon which the government made its decision to expand and enlarge the mission, as reflected in the motion tabled in this place, which was adopted recently, expressing majority support for the government's decision. It is true, Mr. Speaker, that in debate and questions and comments in this place, and then in some media interviews, I reiterated the information that I had received from our military with respect to unique capabilities of RCAF munitions. Last week, the military contacted my office to indicate that they had received new information indicating that, with greater nuance, that the precision-guided munitions of the RCAF were were more specifically useful against dynamic as opposed to static targets. And consequently, the Chief of Defence Staff issued a letter, I believe initially to the Ottawa Citizen, to convey that new information which had come to the military's attention. Again, I accepted the veracity of the information with which I was provided. While I am responsible for all information conveyed either by myself, of course, or by my department, obviously the minister is in a position to accept the information briefed by military commanders. And then this week, Mr. Speaker, the military again contacted my office to indicate that the letter issued by the Chief of Defence Staff was not accurate, and indeed that we are aware of at least 2 other countries, in addition to the United States, who have used precision-guided munitions against ISIL targets in Syria. And consequently, the Chief of Defence Staff sent the following correction to the Ottawa Citizen on March 27th, saying that since the publication of the letter below, in which I stated that the United States was the only nation that used advanced precision-guided munitions in Syria, new information has come to light. A coalition ally has in fact used precision-guided munitions in Syria on at least one occasion. The information contained in the letter, and which was provided by the Canadian Armed Forces to the Minister of National Defence, was based on the best information available at the time it was written. This error is certainly regretted, unquote. Mr. Speaker, at the earliest opportunity, I stood in this House yesterday afternoon to table the letter that I've just cited and to take responsibility as Minister of National Defence. Again, even if I receive inaccurate information in the according to the theory or the principle of ministerial accountability, I'm responsible for that, and I conveyed it, and I regret it. And I do take responsibility. Yesterday I said that as the Minister of National Defence, I'm ultimately responsible for all of the information provided by my department. Therefore, I regret this inaccurate information having been put in the public domain and would like to table this to correct the record, close quote. So, Mr. Speaker, 2 points I want to emphasize. Firstly, at no time was information withheld. To the contrary, my approach has been to be transparent. It has been to share information. Typically, the opposition criticizes the government for being insufficiently transparent and not sharing enough information. Mr. Speaker, nothing was withheld, and as soon as the military saw that new information had come to light, steps were taken to correct the record. And as soon as I became aware of that, I stood in this place and did the same. So no information was withheld, and I can absolutely assure the honourable member that neither I nor I believe the military at any point purposefully or deliberately misled this place or the media. I have absolutely no doubt that the information that I was given, that the military believed the veracity of the information that I was given, and I accepted the source credibility of those briefing me in conveying that to this place and to the public. So, again, it is regrettable that inaccurate information was provided. But, Mr. Speaker, that was not done with any malafides, with any deliberation, with any intent to falsify information, as the honourable member alleges. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, let me say that I do not believe the member's privileges were in any way infringed. He implies that this one piece of inaccurate contextual information may have caused him to vote in a certain way on this motion. I know that's not the case, Mr. Speaker, because the New Democratic Party, including that member, made it patently clear months ago that they opposed any element of the military operation in which Canada is engaged against ISIL, and made it patently clear that they would vote against this matter in any event. And, Mr. Speaker, moreover, as I've said, the government's decision, the decision of Conservative members in this place to support the extension of the mission was based on our belief that we must deny ISIL a safe haven. So, yes, this information was inaccurate, but it was offered as contextual information, not critical to the decision of this place. And actually, not the decision of this place, but the motion adopted by this place to support the government's decision. So, I would further remind the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that I understand that the Standing Committee on National Defence has scheduled to hear from the Chief of Defence Staff as soon as this place reconvenes after the Easter constituency week. And I'm, as the member knows, I'm always happy to appear before committee. So if the member would like to question me or the Chief of Defence Staff or other officials on this matter, we would be happy to make ourselves available, as is the normal practice. So once more, I would, in sum, Mr. Speaker, submit that there is no prima facie case of privilege here. I stood in this place, accepted responsibility for the errant information, which was not relevant to the government or this House's decision on in the vote earlier this week. And I will certainly, in accepting that responsibility, work with my military advisors to be doubly sure of the veracity of any information that we put into the public domain. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Winnipeg North, rising on the same point.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I am somewhat surprised by the Minister of Defence's response. I would have much preferred the Minister of Defense being a little bit more transparent in terms of what has actually taken place. And, Mr. Speaker, if I may, I would ultimately argue that there is reason to believe that there is a prima facie case here, and there is a very strong argument that this matter should, in fact, be going to a committee, and that the House should, in fact, be taking it very seriously. The issue of the extension and expansion of the mission into Syria and potentially beyond is one of a very serious nature. Mr. Speaker, they would ultimately argue that when we ask our men and women of the Canadian Forces to get engaged, that is one of the, if not the most important decision that we have to make as a collective House inside this chamber, Mr. Speaker. So the information that's being provided is of critical importance, even if you already know how a particular party or individual member is going to be voting on the resolution in question, Mr. Speaker. It is still just as important that the Minister of Defence provide accurate information. The Minister of Defence went out of his way to clearly indicate that one of the reasons we were being brought into this extension was because of the need for precision-guided missions that only Canada and the U.S. Have the capabilities of providing, Mr. Speaker. At least that was the context, and I'll expand a little bit more into that. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to you either the Minister did not understand the briefing that would have been provided to him by his department, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that the Minister was, in fact, told the full details, but the Minister either didn't understand it, Mr. Speaker, or he has intentionally attempted to mislead the House. Mr. Speaker, let me give an example of the confusion. You will recall, whether it was the leader of the Liberal Party or other members of the caucus, that have raised the issue that the government needs to be more transparent and honest and forthright with Canadians on this mission. In fact, Mr. Speaker, our mission, and the leader of the Liberal Party raised it in the form of a question stating that our mission on the ground in Iraq was, and I quote, making reference to the Prime Minister, quoting the Prime Minister, to advise and to assist. It is not to accompany. Well, what did the Minister of Defence actually say, Mr. Speaker? How did he respond? Well, the Minister of Defence justified that frontline combat by saying, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "I'm not sure we could train troops without accompanying them." Well, Mr. Speaker, on September the 30th, the Prime Minister explicitly ruled out combat on the ground. He said in a question period, Mr. Speaker, and again, I quote, is to advise and to assist. It is not to accompany. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time with regards to the Minister of Defence. Now we have a very serious media reports, and it seems as if the Minister of Defence wants to throw departmental officials, members of the Canadian Forces, under the collective Conservative bus, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to taking responsibility for his mistake. Mr. Speaker, let me cite a story, if I can, and it was referred to, and I think it is very important and pertaining. This was actually published on March the 30th, 2015. Last week, the Minister of Defence claimed that Canada was needed in the Syrian bombing campaign because it and the U.S. are the only members of the coalition who have precision-guided munitions. Quote, coming from the Minister, there are only 5 coalition partners doing airstrikes against ISIL terror targets in eastern Syria. The Minister explained to CTV. Further quote, the United States is the only one of those 5 that has precision-guided munitions. That is a capability the Royal Canadian Air Force has so. One of the reasons our allies have requested we expand our air sorties into eastern Syria is because with those precision-guided munitions our CF-18s carry, we can be more impactful in the strikes we make against ISIL. Mr. Speaker, that statement was not true. Whether it was inside the chamber or outside the chamber, the Minister of Defence was wrong. So it's either he intentionally misled Canadians and misled this House, or I'm suggesting to you, Mr. Speaker, now he's trying to come in a roundabout way to say, well, just wait a minute. It was my department that didn't provide me the appropriate briefing. The briefing that would have better informed the minister. And I challenged the minister on that, Mr. Speaker. Maybe he had selective hearing. I believe that the military provided him the right briefing. Because even if you go further down in the story, Mr. Speaker, and you listen to, and again, you know, you always got to take a little bit when it's anonymous, but there's a lot of truth when individuals, Mr. Speaker, that know the truth can only say in a very limited way because of the positions that they might be in. So I found this to be an interesting statement that was in the same story. When the minister made his false claim on TV, there were some inside National Defence Headquarters who couldn't figure out why he was saying what he was saying. After all, the minister had been thoroughly briefed about the Syrian mission. So either he didn't understand the basic information he had been told, or he was just ignoring what he had been told. Sources pointed out to Defence Watch. Mr. Speaker, I'm more inclined to believe that than I am to believe the minister's comments that he just finished putting on the record. And if we take a look in terms of the history of the confusion, the mass confusion on this very important issue, Mr. Speaker, I believe that Canadians would agree with what it is that I and others are saying. Is there any doubt why it is more and more Canadians are getting a better appreciation of what is being pointed out about this government and their approach with regards to this mission? As the leader of the Liberal Party has consistently said that this government has failed to be honest with Canadians in regards to this very important issue at hand. And they have not been able to demonstrate their case. And the minister has has to understand, I should say, Mr. Speaker, that he has an obligation, whether we are voting in favour or against the expansion into Syria. He has a responsibility to be straightforward and honest to not only members of this chamber, because by speaking to this chamber, Mr. Speaker, he is speaking to all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And he has not lived up to that responsibility, and that's the reason why we within the Liberal Party believe that there is merit, that there is in fact a prima facie case to be made, that this matter be referred to a standing committee where we could possibly entertain looking at calling and listening to some of those individuals that were involved in this matter, Mr. Speaker. I believe it is of a great serious nature, and ultimately, Mr. Speaker, we will await your decision, and at some point in time in the future, I suspect there might be a need to add further comment as we get to have a better understanding of just how this government is trying to twist their way through some form of a justification, Mr. Speaker, that they have not been able to clearly demonstrate to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, in terms of their behavior in regards to this whole matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I believe the Honourable NDP House Leader is rising on the same point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll be very brief. I think the very lengthy and very detailed submission of the member for St. John's East speaks for itself. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we know that over the next 2 weeks you will have due time to properly consider the points that have been raised by the member from St. John's East, which of course are fundamental points, extremely important points. You'll also have the ability to check the blues, Mr. Speaker. So over the next 2 weeks, you will have the ability to respond. It's really not for any other member of the House to stand and try to push you in one way or the other in terms of the important decision you have to provide to this House. The member for St. John's East has provided a very fulsome and very detailed submission. I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that comments from the Minister of National Defence have not been helpful at all. They were political, certainly not responding to the facts of the matter, and certainly not responding to the two key points that I wanted to reiterate to you, Mr. Speaker, because those are the two key points you'll be considering over the next 2 weeks before you bring back to this House your decision on this matter. And I'm sure many Canadians will be, over the next 2 weeks, very interested in knowing what you will bring back to the House at that time. Now, on page 111 of Erskine May, as my colleague from St. John's East mentioned, it states that the Commons may treat the making of a deliberately misleading statement as contempt. That is a key part of the deliberations that you will be making over the next 2 weeks. And also, second edition of Brian and Bosk, our procedural Bible, the rules under which we are guided, tells us on page 111 that the provision of deliberately misleading information constitutes a prima facie case of privilege. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the case has been laid out by the member from St. John's East. We respect the time that you will take over the next 2 weeks to properly consider the evidence that was put forward by the member from St. John's East. And we look forward to your ruling in due time in 2.5 weeks when we reconvene after the Easter break. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Government House Leader rising on the same point.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the question you're being asked, the question of privilege you're being asked to rule on, is one that has been well tilled, as you might imagine, and there is a very clear set of rules. And there is a three-part test to determine if there has been a breach of the privileges. It was, I know it was clearly established, as cited in O'Brien and Bosk at page 86. So this might be an outdated version I'm looking at here, 2009. But in any event, in 2002, in the decision when Art Eggleton, as Defence Minister, was accused of providing misleading information, the Speaker in this Parliament has, of course, continued that test forward, restating it definitively back in on May 7th, 2012 at page 7469 of debates. And that three-part test is this. Firstly, that it must be proven that the statement was misleading. Secondly, that it must be established that the member making the statement knew at the time that the statement was incorrect. And thirdly, that in making the statement, the member intended to mislead the House. Well, I think there's no dispute that the first of those three tests, and they are not separate tests, they are three that have to be met together. The three tests, that it was an incorrect statement, I think is obviously the case. The member so much as acknowledged that himself, and in fact conducted himself very appropriately in doing what all members should do when they become aware that they made an incorrect statement. He came back to this House and did, of course, table on the record documents correcting this and setting out what the actual facts were, all of which was done before any point of privilege was raised. The member had conducted himself appropriately. So in so doing, by its very nature, we see there that there is no evidence whatsoever that the member knew at the time that his statement was incorrect. In fact, he has said right here in this House that at the time he made it, he believed it to be correct. And as soon as he got information to the contrary, he corrected that to this House. And that, of course, as we know, the rule is we take a member at their word. There is no reason why we shouldn't hear. In fact, the sequence of events suggests veracity in his statement of the facts and recovering of the facts. And as such, the point of privilege that has been raised obviously fails on that second test. That test being that it has to be established that the member making the statement knew at the time that the statement was incorrect. I think all the evidence points in exactly the opposite direction, that at that time he made that statement to the House, he believed it to be correct. So as such, on the second point, there is a failure of the three-part test. And the third part, that in making the statement the member intended to mislead the House, well, obviously, if he believed genuinely, and I think we all accept that that is true, that what he was saying was correct, there is no way that he could have been making the statement with the intent to mislead. And again, the evidence, in the course of evidence, and the fact that he did come to this House and provide documents and correct the record as soon as that came to his attention, I think establishes beyond any doubt whatsoever that he had no intention of misleading the House and conducted himself according to his obligations appropriately. So I put it to you that two of the three tests that have to be met in order to establish a prima facie case of privilege are not met in this circumstance. So there is no question of the member's privileges having been offended. Now, I did want to take on the further question. The member for St. John's seems to have tried to establish a new fourth test. I don't know if it stands on its own independently or it's an additional test, but that being one of reliance, that in some way, somehow, the House or he himself, since he's claiming that his privileges have been offended, that his privileges were offended because he relied on that information. And there might be merit in an argument like that, however novel. There's certainly, I can tell you, no evidence of such a rule anywhere in our rules and any previous decisions of this House that I have seen. I don't think such a rule exists. But if he's making the case to you, Mr. Speaker, that you should create a new rule of reliance because we are now past the vote and it's too late to correct your record because people voted on this, that might have some merit. If there was a member standing up and saying, yes, I voted in favor of what the minister wanted on the reliance of what he said, but now that I have new facts, I would have voted differently. That is not the case for the member claiming that his privileges have been offended here. He, in fact, has been clear from before the minister ever made any such statements how he would vote. He was consistent throughout in his arguments in this House, in debate and so on, how he would vote. And he voted exactly that way, and he continues to stand by that position, the exact same position, after he has now been provided with the proper facts. So there is no argument of reliance for this member that his privileges have been offended. It would be a novel one, but even if one were to accept it, he is not in a position to be able to make that argument here, because the fact is he simply did not rely upon that. So I put it to you, it's not a good test. It shouldn't be established, but if he's putting to you that it should be a test, he is not in a position to be able to rely on this new and novel test. So, Mr. Speaker, I put it to you, it's a fairly simple, open and shut case. There is no question of the privileges of the House or any member having been offended here, and as such, I think you could rule on it quite quickly and dismiss the matter.
Is the honourable member for Vancouver Quad Rising on the same point? Before I go to her, I just encourage all honourable members, if they have relevant or new information on the point, if they could make that succinctly, but not to go beyond that point and debate the points that have been made by others. So with that, the honourable member of Vancouver Quadra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this is an incredibly important point of privilege. It's a very important issue because it goes to the heart of whether Canadians can trust this minister and this government with their serious responsibility around taking Canada into war. And the Liberals believe that it's simply not credible that this minister was inadvertently misbriefed and didn't know what he was saying. And I think the timeline actually supports that. It was already on the public record. The United States General Dempsey had publicly congratulated 2 other countries for their use of precision missiles in Syria before the statement was made by the minister, the statement that was so conveniently alleging that Canada was asked to expand our bombing mission into Syria. So I would like to ask the minister to table any documents supporting that Canada was asked to enter that bombing mission in Syria based on, as he alleged, that Canada was the only other country with precision missiles. Mr. Speaker, it took several days after the public record was corrected by a journalist that what the minister had said was actually false. Several days later, the Chief of Defence Staff wrote a letter to the Ottawa Citizen confirming the minister's story. So I would like to ask the minister, did he or his office request that the Chief of Defence Staff or the Chief of Defence Staff's office send that letter to back up the minister? And lastly, because it is so difficult to believe that the minister made a genuine mistake, and although he has apologized while blaming the staff, a third request I have is that this minister would table all of his...
Order. The matter before the House is a question of privilege. It's not debate or question period to the minister. If this honourable member would like the minister to table certain documents, she has ample opportunity in other fora in this place to do that. This discussion specifically around a point of privilege I think has proceeded. The facts are on the table, and as I said, if this member would like to pose those questions to the minister, she will have opportunity to do that. Very quickly, the honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Should the minister accept my request that he tables his briefing notes, it would help the speaker in making a determination about this point of privilege. Thank you.
The chair thanks all honourable members for their input into this matter, and as you might expect, the speaker will consider all these facts and return to the House following the Easter break. Orders of the day.
Ordre émanant du gouvernement, projet de loi émanant du gouvernement commune, reprise du débat en deuxième lecture du projet de loi C-42, loi visant la délivrance simple et sécuritaire des permis d'armes à feu.
Resuming debate on Bill C-42.
There remains 2 minutes before the question will be put for the honourable member for McLeod. The honourable member for McLeod.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to rise today to speak about Bill C-42, the Common Sense Firearms Licensing Act. This is a fantastic step forward for law-abiding firearms owners across Alberta and across Canada. I am proud to be able to stand here and support it. And on behalf of the law-abiding firearms owners in my riding of McLeod, I would like to thank the Minister of Public Safety for moving this important legislation forward. And I would also be remiss if I did not thank the member of Yorkton Melville. This member has carried this torch for years, and he's been standing up for law-abiding gun owners and eliminating needless red tape. Now, we have heard comments from many hunting and sporting shooting groups across Canada who support this legislation. We have heard from the Canadian Police Association, who supports this legislation. And I've heard from residents in southern Alberta who also support this legislation. They support this because it follows our Conservative government's views on firearms policies. Policies that are safe, and they should also be sensible. Overall, this bill continues to focus on pursuing common sense firearms legislation, something that has been lacking for far too long. Some have asked, why are these changes being made now? The pundits seem to say that this bill is simply pandering in advance of an election. That could not be further from the truth. This bill is not about hobbies. It is about an important economic driver in our country. In fact, hunting and sport shooting is a billion-dollar industry. This is also about a way of life, both in rural Canada and urban communities. There are millions of Canadians in all walks of life who enjoy participating in these Canadian heritage activities. For them, this is not a so-called gun lobby. This is about enjoying a treasured part of life. Some have asked, why are we combining different licenses and giving new rights to possession-only license owners? Some have argued the effect of this proposal would only be that it was required to take a mandatory training course. Thank you. Happy.
With apologies, it being 1:15 p.m. pursuant to an order made Wednesday, April 1st, 2015, is my duty to interrupt the proceedings and put forth with every question necessary to dispose of the second reading stage of the bill now before the House. The question is as follows. Mr. Blaney, seconded by Ms. Bergen, move that Bill C-42, an act to amend the Firearms Act and the Criminal Code and to make a related amendment and a consequential amendment to other acts, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? All those in favour will please say yea. Yay. All those opposed will please say nay. Yay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Pursuant to an order made on Thursday, February 26, 2015, the Recorded Division stands deferred until Monday, April 20th, 2015 at the ordinary hour of daily adjournment. Do we need to see the clock? The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think if you seek it, you'll find agreement to see the clock at 1:30.
Does the Chief Government Whip have the agreement to see the clock at 1:30? Agreed. The House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members' business, consideration at second reading of Bill C-644, an act to amend the Criminal Code and the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, failure to comply with a condition, standing in the name of Mr. Hillier.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge is not present to move the order as announced in today's notice paper. Accordingly, the item will be dropped to the bottom of the order precedence on the order paper. It being 1:19, pursuant to an order made Thursday, February 26, 2015, this House stands adjourned until Monday, April the 20th, 2015 at 11 a.m. pursuant to Standing Orders 28.2 and 24.1. Happy Easter.